We are live now with the State of the Toodle, State of the Noodle 2024 Part 2. We promised this stream after we did the State of the Noodle previously in the Grief era that we all knew that Grief was inevitably going to get banned and we'd have to come back to this. So this is our sit-down chat about everything Death and Taxes that you'll need to know for Eternal Weekend. And by we, I mean me and Akaleth, my guest here.
Hello, everybody. Hope you know who I am, but if you don't, hi, I'm Akaleth. I'm also a D&T player. I hosted the previous State of the Noodle that we had earlier this year, back in July, if I remember right. And I am happy to come back and do it all again. I'm glad we have a lot of really cool stuff to talk about though this time. It's not just like, yeah, we're very slight modifications to what we were doing before Grief was banned. There's actually a lot of cool stuff to talk about, so excited to get into it.
All right, chat, let me know if the audio and stuff is good, if I need to turn myself up or turn Akaleth up. Please don't tell me to talk louder, actually, because my mic is cranked all the way up, and I just talk really quietly. But we'll get started here. Morning, I guess, due to Dukes over in Australia. It's 8 p.m. over here.
9 p.m. Thank you very much.
Yeah, in real person time, I guess.
Yeah.
All right, so things might be a little hectic. My internet went out when I came home today after work and was trying to get everything sorted for the stream, so was doing some of the stuff last minute. We might be trying to pull some deck lists up that I didn't prepare, but for now, let's get into what we want to talk about, which is what does D&T look like right now? And the answer is it kind of depends. D&T looks like a lot of things right now. There are like 2.5, I guess, different splashes going around. People are trying a lot of stuff. Mono White had some pretty successful attempts in Japanese Eternal Weekend that happened this past week. So the first thing we want to talk about is like what we think of the various D&T lists that I would say are stock or close to stock right now. What we think about them. How we think they're positioned going into the current meta. So up first we have what I would consider very stock black-white D&T. This is, I think, straight from Akaleth's flex slot page. How about you tell me about this list?
Yes, it is. It should be. I think it might be like within a card of it. It's very close. If you played black-white while Grief was still legal, this list probably looks pretty similar. And that's because, yeah, it hasn't changed very much at all. I think the main deck might literally be exactly the same. It's really only the sideboard that's changed. I think one thing we definitely learned, even like through the Grief era, was that Emperor of Bones is just a really strong card in the deck. Its strength is not predicated on your opponent wanting to put creatures into the graveyard that they then reanimate. It's just really good buying back Solitudes, buying back Recruiters that get countered, buying back Stoneforges that get Fatal Pushed. Just a lot of great things you can do with that card. The only thing that's really changed since is the sideboard, and even the sideboard hasn't changed a whole lot. The list that I took to the tournaments that happened at SCG Baltimore back in July, not that long after we did the State of the Noodle. I think the only real difference is slightly lighter on the graveyard hate. Have room for these Wrath of the Skies is basically the new card that I'm playing in here. There's a couple different matchups that's for, namely, it's really good against Painter and other Urza Saga decks. Also helps with the Nadu matchup as well. Particularly the Nadu Elves matchup. It's not as good as the other ones, but Nadu is definitely a weak spot for this deck. So yeah, really, everything that we mentioned about this deck before, still true. Reanimator is still a very strong deck, even after Grief got banned. And given that, I think this deck still has a very very strong and coherent game plan against Reanimator, probably the strongest of the decks that we're going to talk about today. Um, and yeah, it's just great. It's comfy. I like it. Thoughtseize is really good. There's really no dead matchups for that card. Yeah, not much else to say about it, honestly.
Yeah, I think this is really close to what I played at the Gen Con Legacy event. I think this might be the exact same main deck. That was like pre Grief Ban. Wrath of the Skies is probably the only like big inclusion lately, and that was mostly just because, like you said, some sideboard space freed up from like the oppressive hand of Reanimator. We got to like kind of plan for a little bit more matchups. Wrath of the Skies is a nice card to have versus Saga decks. I like it a lot versus some of the various flavors of Nadu as well. It's just kind of a easy way to clean up a lot of their like little 1/1s, mana dorks, nomads, shukos, whatever have you. I've already realized that we've gone slightly off script because I was supposed to lead with red white, but we're just gonna keep running from here. I do think that this list is very good. I like it a lot. I obviously, for those of you that have like been following, what we've been streaming and stuff, I've been really high on the red white stuff. We'll get into later, but I think this list is very good, very comfy. Like was mentioned, Thoughtseize is just a very like safe security blanket of a card. Keeps you safe from all the bad decks that are gonna come and get you. Dark Ritual, Doomsday, turn 1, Karn the Great Creators and stuff. Thoughtseize can keep you safe from some of that. I do think the big thing that is drawing me away from the black right now is the abundance of Nadu and Eldrazi. I find, especially Eldrazi, I find that black doesn't really have like. Oh right, sorry. I probably should mention that at the start of the stream. Every time you see plate armor for the rest of the stream, it's pre-war formal wear. There's no pre-war formal wear on Moto yet. It's out in 18 hours. It's just a 3-mana equipment that costs 2 and away. It's pre-war formal wear. It's in every deck list. I'm sorry. It'll be on Moto tomorrow, and we can all have fun. And we can never have to look at this stupid random uncommon again. This is pre-war formal wear. Thank you, Pepperjack, for reminding me to mention that. Anyway, Eldrazi matchup. I don't think the black cards are like especially great there. Eldrazi exiles a lot of your stuff, so like your Emperor of the Bones gets a little bit less use. Obviously, with Exalted, it's still really good. I have been playing a little bit of like black-white stuff. I found Thoughtseize is pretty decent against Eldrazi because it's like one of the only reasonable ways to interact with Sowing Microspawn outside of Consigned to Memory. So like you do get to Thoughtseize that sometimes, and then the other decks are just like, please don't cast this for 6 mana, which is not the best way to try to counteract that card. But I found that the Eldrazi matchup still leaves a little bit to be desired, and same with the Nadu matchup a little bit. Thoughtseize and Emperor are both like still good cards there. It's hard for those cards to really find a bad matchup with how synergistic Emperor is with the deck, and how Thoughtseize is good against your opponent if they're putting spells in their deck. But Nadu, much like Eldrazi, is exiling a lot of your cards, so you have to be a little bit more proactive in trying to like fuel it with something like a Solitude. Thoughtseize is obviously good versus an A+B sort of combo deck, but Nadu is a deck that goes really long. You can Thoughtseize a Nadu on turn 1, and then turn 5 or 6 or whatever, they assemble the combo again. And oftentimes you kind of want to have stuff that can break up their combo even in like the mid to late game. Not to say that these matchups are, unbearable, unbeatable, except for maybe the Eldrazi matchup, but these are some of the reasons that I would be tempted to reach for other colors. And we'll address one of those matchups in a second here with the other list.
Yep. Do you want to actually skip to red-white, and then we'll
double back.
We'll go double back, because I think that'll set up my other list pretty well.
That makes sense. And the other side of the spectrum is red-white D&T, affectionately referred to by at least me as Exploding Kittens Taxes. This is the almost exact 95 that I played very recently in a RCDC side event. There was a win a big card event that I got to the finals of. It tragically lost to blue-black Scam. This is the exact same list, except I was playing 3 Skyclave, 1 Formal Wear. I was mostly just prepping for what I'm likely going to play tomorrow, which is going to be starting at 2 Formal Wear, just trying that. But this list is a lot different than the black-white list. In exchange for Thoughtseize and Emperor of Bones, we get the main deck card is Chainsaw. I guess we never really talked about Phantom Blade, but we've talked to death about that one in previous, especially the previous state of the Noodle and stuff. But you get Chainsaw instead of Phantom Blade, and then we get Broadside Bombardiers and Magus of the Moon as our red cards. And Johnny is kind of like a honorary red card. It's a lot worse when you don't have red permanents in your deck. That's for sure. One of the big draws to this card is the fact that we can flip it and have a Chainsaw or a Bombardiers in play and start getting lightning bolts out of the zero. But this deck kind of exchanges some of the inherent synergies that Black-White has. Emperor of Bones is just a card that plays really nicely with the rest of the cards in the deck. We compared it to Felia, like a good Felia a lot, as just kind of a way to cash in your ETB triggers again. Just stuff that works well with D&T, works well. Like, you get to these late game sort of stages, you Yori on your whole board and stuff. The red cards don't work as well with that. Magus of the Moon, just not really a flickerable card. Broadside Bombardiers also doesn't really do anything if you're flickering your stuff. Also just kind of demands that you make your board smaller in exchange for this damage. So you're sacking a lot of your fodder, trying to interact with your opponent, but you are, making some of your Yorions later down the road worse. Chainsaw, same as Phantom Blade, is this kind of nice removal spell. I've been really excited about this addition from Duskmourn. Pretty huge add for the red-white deck in general. And then we get to the sideboard where we get to the real red cards, because you're not really allowed to main deck Red Elemental Blast like you can maybe main deck Thoughtseize. But Red Elemental Blast is really the big reason that I like the red splash, outside of Magus of the Moon. I really try to drill into people's heads that I don't like splashing colors in D&T for just cute, fancy little this cute one of that you can recruiter for, I'm really blanking on the name of that stupid pirate that lets you snapcaster your opponent's cards.
Direfleet Daredevil.
Yeah, that's the one. Direfleet Daredevil. People are like, you could play a Direfleet Daredevil. It's yeah, you could, but you could just put good cards in your deck instead. You really want to just play the really good. You play to the strengths of the color that you're dipping into. You don't want to just play a little fun of cute cards a lot. I really try to stray away from that. Red Elemental Blast is just a really good card to put in your deck right now. It's really good against Nadu, good against Delver, pretty good against blue-black. It is much better, at least, against blue-black than it has been previously. With Grief gone, they're a lot worse at the fair threat game, and you do just get a bunch of extra ways to answer Frog and also interact with Brazen Borrower on your Graveyard Hate. Stuff like that. So while not as good as the black cards in that matchup specifically, I really like the blasts against a lot of the decks right now, especially Nadu. Nadu has been a thorn in my side that I've been really trying to address, and I've found Pyroblast to be one of the more comfy ways to interact with it. Kind of easily trades 1-for-1 with Nadu in any stage of the game. Can also blast cantrips or what have you. Isn't totally dead when you draw it on turn 6 or 7 or whatever. And then Magus of the Moon, didn't really touch on it a lot, but obviously this is one of the biggest reasons you want to play this card is for Eldrazi, a matchup that has really been the scourge of D&T since MH3. It's a tough matchup to crack. I intend to really drill down deep into it, get some really dedicated Eldrazi testing at some point between now and Eternal Weekend, because man, that matchup is rough, and it's hard to figure out what the best strategy is. Magus Moon isn't even a perfect band-aid, or even a very good one. 3 mana is a lot in that matchup, and sometimes you're just already getting Stone Rain to Kingdom Come, or they just float 5 mana and Kozilek's command your thing, or they just make 1 mana and dismember it. It's definitely not the perfect solution to the problem, but it is the best that I've felt so far, at least.
I think it speaks to how desperate we are that one of our most coherent plans against Eldrazi is to play a Magus and hope that they don't get to cast any more spells.
Yeah, that is... I mean, that's kind of a lot of Legacy right now. It's hope your 3 mana card really just messes them up. Also, I see a lot of questions in chat. I will probably not be answering a ton of them right now. We do have a dedicated Q&A at the end, something that I also forgot to plug at the start of the stream, but we will be doing a Q&A at the end of the stream after we go through the splash list. We're going to go through kind of the matchups in Legacy right now, and then we'll do a Q&A, so please hold your questions to the end because we'll be doing a lot of talking and not as much reading. I've lost my train of thought. I think I said most of my piece. I guess the kind of the core difference between black white and red white in my mind is that black white really plays to the strengths of the inevitability of death and taxes. That's something that I like harped on a lot, is that like D&T is like one of the best end game decks in the format, and black white really just kind of enhances that with big value cards like Emperor of Bones. But red white doesn't really play to those strengths, but it does exchange some of your late game potential for the ability to turn the corner with stuff like Broadside Bombardier, which I think is really important in the format right now. A lot of the top decks of the format don't really care that D&D is the best end game deck in the format. Stuff like Reanimator, with just like going big with, obviously giant Reanimator threats on like turn 1 or 2 ideally. Nadu, a deck that obviously you want to grind against them, but they can also just kill you at the drop of a hat, and you need to just be ready for that. And you would rather not take your sweet time and like go to turn 12. Ideally you want to just turn the corner, hit them hard with like Broadside Solitude, their thing, chuck the Solitude at their face or something. Eldrazi similarly absolutely does not care that you're gonna win if you're gonna win the game on turn 16, because they are just going to beat you into the dirt and then stone range you 17 times, and you're not gonna really be able to get to that end game state.
Yeah, I think that is an important point to make, and I still really like the Black Splash, and I think more than anything, it just speaks to a personal preference from my side to like, I like playing that really long game, even if I think I agree with you that it doesn't matter the end game of like looping your Yorion and using it 3 times to like flicker to permanents. That doesn't really happen anymore. But I still just prefer the way that the black spells play. But I think like you might be able to bring up a more an example where this is more true, but I feel like this is the first time in a while where I've felt like 2 very different builds of D&T are both very strong for different reasons.
Yeah. I think I definitely agree with that. And they like there are legitimate strengths and weaknesses. It feels like for the past 2 State of the Noodles, I don't remember exactly what we talked about in 2023, but like every time the topic of like mono white D&T would come up, and I'd be like, it's still like pretty good, and like in my head I'd be like, mono white players are kind of coping a little bit, but I'd try to like pass it off as it's like you can still play mono white if you really want to, and we'll talk about mono white here in a few deck lists as well, but I do think very legitimately these like black white and red white have different strengths and weaknesses. Red white I feel is like extremely targeted towards the top of the meta, stuff like Nadu, Eldrazi. It targets the blue black decks less because I think those are like a little bit of better matchups for D&T overall. So I'm like trying to target some of D&T's more populous bad matchups, but I am sacrificing a decent amount versus what I lovingly refer to as the nonsense bracket. And Thoughtseize, a very good security blanket card against all of the nonsense stuff out there. You're going to be able to play your consistent D&T game more, where red white sometimes you're going to play against a deck where your red cards just don't matter at all, and you're just playing a pretty bad mostly mono white D&T deck.
All right, I think you want to head over to my other list, and we'll see what I've been doing to sort of split the difference between these 2.
Yeah. You can take this one away.
All right, yes. So this is black white death and taxes, but I put some Magus of the Moons in it because the Eldrazi matchup just really stinks. I've been playing this on my stream for the past couple weeks. I actually took this list to a 5K this past weekend. It did really well. Um, the basically I've been playing some White Orchid Phantoms in my sideboard, in the place of where like this basic mountain and these two Magus of the Moons are. And I found that like my main problem with White Orchid Phantom against Eldrazi in particular is that the first White Orchid Phantom doesn't really feel like it does very much. Because taking a land down from making 2 mana to making 1 mana when it's still colorless just doesn't really feel like it does a whole lot. And you can't afford to be spending 2 mana on a spell that doesn't do a whole lot in that matchup, or you just kind of die. Um, for that reason, I kind of wanted to take a bit of a sledgehammer approach and just replace those with Magus of the Moons. I put a Magus of the Moon in the main deck as well, to try to spike that against Eldrazi. Um, and this is going to be some imperfect logic that I'm using here, but it's been really nice that I feel like I have very rarely used my Magus of the Moons, but it doesn't really feel like I've been punished for having them in my deck. Like I've still been beating the matchups that I feel like I'm supposed to beat. Um, Having the Maguses in my deck, even if they've sometimes been dead weight, haven't felt like dead weight that's really affected me. And it has pretty much. I think since I have put the Maguses in my deck, I have not. I have at least won a game in every match I've played against Eldrazi because I had Magus. Um, so that's nice. One of the obvious cons here is that the mana looks a little bit nonsensical. I'm playing one plateau in the main deck, and there's the basic mountain in the sideboard. The mana is kind of awkward. I didn't like that I had to cut a basic plains for this because I really liked 6, but was fine with 5 plains, and now I have to go to 4, and that feels a little bad, but it's not the end of the world either. Um, the sideboard mountain looks really dumb. It might be dumb. It's mostly motivated by the fact that I am a Prismatic Vista stan. I know that one detail that I think we've been overlooking in these lists is, I still prefer to have a list with 4 Prismatic Vista because it is really like getting basics whenever I can. I know that most of your lists, you basically just cut 2 Prismatic Vistas for 2 white fetches, so you have easier access to your duels and specifically to your surveil lands. And I think that's another kind of personal preference thing. As long as you know like the reasons that you're making that choice, either one is probably fine. Um, but because I have 4 Prismatic Vistas, that's why I'm specifically putting a basic mountain in the deck, because if I add the mountain, that's +5 red sources for the matches where I am boarding in Magus and really want to be able to cast it. One important difference from when I was playing the Obzon list with that was splashing for Gaddock Teague, sort of late last year, beginning of this year, is that the matchup where you really want Magus, Eldrazi, and a lot of the other ones are also matchups where you're getting wastelanded, so you can't afford to live off of just a single green source in your deck for Gaddock Teague like you used to be able to, because that was mostly for like Beanstalk decks that had like a wasteland in their deck, if that. So that's where I mostly stand on Magus. I think it's definitely helped the Eldrazi matchup. Has it helped it enough? I'm not totally sure yet. Just like you said, I also have to do my own focus testing because, and I also want to try White Orchid Phantom against Eldrazi again, specifically because most of the Eldrazi lists cut down to only one basic land, where they used to play a waste and a forest. Now they usually just play the wastes. Um, and it's possible that'll make White Orchid Phantom feel at least a little bit better. I'm not convinced, but it's still worth trying.
Yeah, certainly.
And then I think the only other new cards, yeah, Wrath of the Skies, as mentioned, we kind of already talked about what that card is for. Other this kind of applies to both this and the previous and the black white list I was talking about before because they're pretty similar. I have been thinking about something like maybe a needle in the deck, to help with the Nadu matchup a bit, because if you put Needle on Nomads and Core, um, they usually have some answer to it. Like the Nadu Zenith decks will have like prismatic endings or whatever, but um, having at least that, you know, permanent layer of defense that they have to answer would make me feel a little bit more comfy about that matchup. But yeah, the other thing I've been thinking about is maybe trying to find room for Bowmasters again, but I have no idea what I'd cut unless I'm cutting like Flicker Wisps, which I certainly could, but I'm just not sure.
Yeah, that's something I've been thinking about. Is that like I really liked my like breakfast matchup and stuff back last year when we were playing black white, and we just had like Bowmasters in the deck. The matchups where your opponents were casting cantrips and putting X1s into play, Bowmasters was really good, and I think Bowmasters would be a way to improve the Nanu matchup. That I've felt that it's like kind of iffy on the black side. But yeah, I'm not really sure where you would fit it in. It's the lists have just felt tighter and tighter lately. We're trying to fit in Formalware now online for the first time too. But it's a direction that I have been thinking about going in several times.
Yeah. I think my biggest worry is that it wouldn't really be that good versus Zenith in particular, because they'll all, I don't know. I feel like I haven't played a single game against Zenith where they don't play
Halfling.
a halfling on turn one, and then that means the nomads can't die to Bowmasters anyway. So
Yeah, they're also often incentivized to play Nadu into nomads on like the combo turns if they're playing it all out in one turn.
yeah, that's true.
So they get to like draw their card if you do have the removal spell or whatever, and then you can't Bowmaster that either.
Yeah, I think my sign off for this list will be, seriously though, fuck sewing Myco Spawn.
That card, the card is so obnoxious. Like, I get it. People were clipletic about that during the Grief era, and I just didn't get it because I was just not playing against Eldrazi ever. I was just playing against infinite Grief scam decks, and it was just like I don't know. It's like a bunch of mana. It doesn't seem that bad to me. And now I've played against Eldrazi a bunch. And, man, fuck that card.
It's so I like legitimate. I tweeted about this like a month ago or so. Like, I legitimately worry for the long-term ability for any non-blue or non-red deck to have like long-term viability if sowing Myco Spawn is legal, because it just makes every non-blue fair deck explode. Like,
yeah,
all of them.
Yeah, like if you're a deck that's trying to hit more than like 2 land drops, then sowing Myco Spawn just completely obliterates you if they ever cast it. It is not a very reasonable card. Why is it target basics? We didn't need to do that.
I legitimately feel like I could make a cogent argument that sowing Myco Spawn needs to be banned before Psychic Frog does. Like,
the true worst part is that like Psychic Frog is so clearly the problem card for so many like decks right now. It's like 30% or more of the meta between blue black tempo and blue black reanimator, but just like sowing Mega Spawn sucks, man. Can we get that shit out of here?
it's a problem. It, like, legitimately, it can't exist. I'm sorry.
It's just a problem that's just gonna get pushed down the road even further. It's an endlessly compounding series of issues where they didn't ban Grief for like 2 months. So we had to like sit there in the Grief format and waste our time, and now we're just sitting in the Frog format wasting our time, and then they're gonna be like, okay, we're sorry, we banned the Frog after Eternal Weekend, and then we're gonna sit in the Myco Spawn Nadu waiting room, and just feels like everything's a season behind.
Yeah. Oh, one last point I want to make with this list is that the Path to Exiles in the black-white list, I've been recently trying Fatal Push in their place. Specifically because when Magus of the Moon is going to be my plan in multiple matchups, I do not want to actively give my opponent basic lands. So I just wanted to try that out. Mostly it's been fine. I haven't played a ton with it yet, but even in matchups like Reanimator, for example, like Path is much more consistent because you need to have answers for cards like the big ones, the Atraxas and the Archons,
or even just like Troll
and Troll,
the Miracle guy.
Metamorphosis Fanatic, and Fatal Push on the other hand basically only answers Frog and the Brazen Borrower they play, and sometimes some lists play like what's it called? Oh, Emperor Bones. That's what I'm trying to think of. But I've never, since we have so many removal spells that exile the big things, I've mostly found that as long as you sequence it and make sure that you get the value out of the Fatal Push as soon as you can, it's mostly been fine so far.
Yeah, makes sense. I was struggling to come up with a removal spell. Like, I kind of wanted like a sideboard spot removal thing in red white, and just like you don't really want to cast Path in your Magus deck a lot. I had like one Path in my sideboard for a while that I ended up just like cutting from the sideboard altogether and just saying, hey, I probably have no spot removal. But yeah, it makes sense that once you're dipping into the black, you get a little bit better spot removal in addition to the Magus.
Yeah.
All right, I think we've said all that we want to say about what I would consider the 2 or 2.5, I guess, lists that I would be confident registering in the format right now. So now we're going to talk about some of the lists I would be less confident playing as soon as this cat gets off me, because she is drooling on me. Let's not do that, kitty. All right, so what we are looking at here is mono white D&T from at Dull04, Dull04 on Twitter. This player went 8-2, I believe, in Japanese Eternal Weekend to make top 16. I'm gonna be frank, I don't understand truly so many things about this list. As a resident hater of a lot of cards in this deck, I am trying my hardest to be objective about the things going on here, and I just don't get it. We have Vexing Bauble, a card that I don't understand what we're playing this card for. This card is good against so it's good against combo decks that play 0-drops, and it's good against Force of Wills, right? There's not a lot else that people are casting for free that matter. Against the fair decks, D&T is not a deck that's traditionally cared about Force of Will. Like, if you're getting your card Force First Delver, you usually are okay with trading a 2-for-1, or you're dying because they're Force Willing your answer to Murktide, and half the time your answer to Murktide is Solitude, so you can't even do that through your Vexing Bubble anyway. Against the combo decks, almost every combo deck right now that's seeing play either doesn't care about Vexing Bauble or plays Vexing Bauble because it's 1-mana defense grid. So, like, I don't really understand what this Bauble's doing there.
Even Tess is playing Vexing Bauble and then using their Veil of Summers to get, Veil of Summers to get through it.
Turbo Forge is just playing Vexing Bauble, and they have like only Petal and Opal, I think, that they need to cast into it if your opponent has one. Like Doomsday, sure, you get to like turn off their Force of Will and then try to like turn off their LED or whatever, and then try to resolve your like Spirit of the Labyrinth a little bit better or something. But I don't get this. Doesn't feel like a D&T card to me at all. I don't get it. And then there's like the Felia that I will forever be on a soapbox about not thinking it's good enough. The one saving grace of Felia is that it is real. Theoretically, I've never actually gotten to do this because I've played so little in paper, but theoretically it's really, really good with pre-war formalware, and maybe that's enough to push it over the edge. I will, in all earnesty, try mono white at some point between now and Eternal Weekend. Now that we have access to pre-war formalware, I will try mono white. I will try Felia. I have played Felia in other decks. I've played Felia in mono white in testing. I truly don't see the vision at all. I just don't get it. This deck also fully cut Spirit of the Labyrinth. Like, this deck has no Vexing Bauble is your combo interaction, and none of the combo decks care about Vexing Bauble. I don't understand how this deck is structured to fight against anything unfair. And then in your sideboard, you have 2 Fairy Macabre and 1 Containment Priest. This is your only additional graveyard hate in addition to your 1 main deck Containment Priest. This deck notably beat Blueback Reanimator 4 times in Eternal Weekend, but like I don't see that being a consistent strategy at all. I think if I took this list and played it in a 10-round tournament, I would not go 4-0 against Reanimator most of the time.
I would be curious how many of those matches the Reanimator opponent just boarded out in Tombs. because
Yeah.
that is a thing that a lot of Reanimator players do that I don't that is just wrong. Um, but it's tempting to because of the fear of graveyard hate. Um, and I mean, if they do that, a list like this could beat them up because I mean,
Yeah.
we'll get to the details later, but TNT is really good at opponents just trying to cast creatures. So
Yeah, I really like. I very much don't love the plan that is just like, I hope my Reanimator opponent doesn't know how to actually sideboard against TNT. Uh, Fun note, that is exactly how I lost the finals of the Win a Big Card event, is that my opponent did know how to sideboard against TNT, and I watched as they mulled 2-5, and then I kept a hand that maybe I shouldn't have kept, and maybe I should have mulliganed more aggressively, and then they turn 1 Entomb, turn 2 Reanimated Atraxa, turn 3 Reanimated Archon against me, and that's how I died. And like, there are so many Reanimator players that will just be like, "Oh, I'm just gonna cast Ponder into Frog into Barrowgoyf against TNT, and that'll be good enough."
it's not good enough.
I will say the one thing I do kind of like. Disruptor Flute, like you mentioned Pithing Needle earlier, Flute is a very similar shaped card, obviously. 2 mana is a lot more than 1, but it has a lot more applicability with, the ability to attack spells as in addition to being that Pithing Needle effect. It's a card that I've, like, thought about for, like, kind of the Nadu matchups. It helps versus a bunch of random combo stuff. Turns off, the One Ring or whatever. It's good against a lot. It's a pretty reasonable card. And then you also have the Stone Brain, which is, like, a card that I almost get it. Like, the theory there makes some sense. This card is pretty good against, like, Nadu if you activate it, right? All the Nadu decks that exist right now, I guess with the exception of Breakfast, are, like, pretty stone dead if you just activate Stonebrain, name Nadu. Like, their decks completely fall apart, which is kind of hilarious. 4 mana is a lot, but, like, I can't say I don't, like, at least see the vision on this one more than the Vexing Baubles and the Felia and stuff. I guess the other thing is that I don't see the vision on. I more than anything, I wish that I could communicate with the Japanese D&T community, because, like, this 3 Cataclysm, 2 Wrath of the Skies stuff goes crazy. Like, what are we casting Cataclysm against right now? Maybe it's a plan against Nadu, but, like, do you need 2 Wraths and 3 Cataclysms as your Nadu plan? Are we casting Cataclysm versus Eldrazi? I could, like, maybe buy that as a plan. 2018 miracles, exactly. Like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that this list I don't agree with. I don't understand. It's very confusing to me. Props to Dolo for making top 16. Wait, am I missing a card in the sideboard? Why am I looking at it? I have the list off to my left as well, and there's a Ghost Vacuum. Why are there 15 sideboard cards here? Am I insane? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Huh? What? Hang on, let me pull up this list so Chad doesn't think I'm crazy. There is a Ghost Vacuum right here. What am I missing?
The Containment Priest. The Containment Priest isn't in there.
Oh, there's no Containment Priest in there. Okay. It's a Ghost Vacuum instead of Containment Priest. Alright. I don't know why I'm going to change this, because I'm never going to use this list, but...
Important for posterity.
Yeah. Also, hey, cat, cut that out. Hang on. Technical difficulties, stand by. Get out of here. Get.
Hey Chad, how's it going?
Alright, technical difficulties over. Ghost Vacuum, definitely better than the second Containment Priest, I'll give him that. I don't know why this deck imported like that. Very bizarre. But I guess Ghost Vacuum is notably a card that I have yet to mention. There was one in my sideboard as well. I really like this card. It's kind of a nice, like, 1 mana Graveyard Hate card that gets to come in versus stuff like Delver and some of the more fair decks as kind of a, like, side grade of Grafdigger's Cage. I've been enjoying it. I haven't activated the 6-mana ability a lot, but I did get to activate it at the RCDC event, and I got a frog and a Delirious Dragon's Rage Chandler, which was really funny.
Yeah, I've been thinking about trying it over like my third Grafdigger's Cage.
Yeah, that's exactly where I have it.
Especially because I've had enough annoying points where like my cage turns off my formal wear. I don't think that's ever like lost me a game, notably, but it's a nombo to potentially avoid. So.
All right, I'm done shitting on this list. I will show off Defiant Cathar, Eliana, another very notable D&T player. This is her mono white list that she's been playing. I believe she's planning on probably playing black white or potentially black white red in Vegas next week. This week? I don't remember.
Next week. This week is CubeCon.
Sure, yes. This is Eliana's list that, at least makes more sense to me. There's a respectable amount of graveyard hate in this sideboard. We have 2 Cage, 1 Surgical, 1 Macabre, Sanctifier, Tamer Priest. I appreciate that. We got the spirits in here. No Vexing Bauble shenanigans. Like, if I were to play mono white, I would probably play a list like this. I don't think, there's not a lot to say. Damning Sphere is a card that I had it, at the very beginning of the post-grief format in my sideboard. I was like, this card might be, reasonable against Eldrazi. And then I never really tested it out, and then eventually just cut the Damning Sphere, and, maybe it should come back. Maybe it'd be a nice card to play against Eldrazi. Who knows? The big thing here is I would really want to work out if this the Felia White Orchid Phantom Dream can be lived versus stuff like Eldrazi, because we mentioned this in the very first State of the Noodle when we were talking about Mono White and White Orchid Phantom. I do think that the playability of Mono White lives and dies right now on the playability of White Orchid Phantom. It is a very powerful card sometimes, and the better it is in the meta, the more attractive Mono White looks to me. Boy, do I not want to put White Orchid Phantom in my deck right now. It's just, it's really bad against a lot of things that aren't specifically Eldrazi. But, maybe you can get, it's not, Nadu's got 3 basics lately. I wish that Grixis Delver got picked up more than Blue-Black did, because Grixis Delver doesn't have any basics. Sometimes they had, 1, but Blue-Black solidly has 2 basics. Blue-Black Reanimator also has 2 basics. But, there's, just so many matchups where your White Orchid Phantom isn't actually doing anything. And, it's good that you get to play, Flagstones in your deck, so you can make your White Orchid Phantom have a little bit more extra text, ramp you a little bit. But I do think the playability of Mono White is very, very dependent on your ability to profitably utilize White Orchid Phantom as a hate bearer.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, it's tough when the starting point is the format is 30% blue-black decks that all have an island and a swamp.
Yeah, that's the big I really just don't think people are out there respecting the blue-black decks enough. Your matchup as D&T, I do believe, is good, but you really need to respect them. Your matchups against those types of decks can only go so far, and you really can't just be I'll just play 2 graveyard hate cards in my 80 card deck or whatever, and maybe they won't entomb me. Maybe I'll get lucky. You really, people need to be respecting these matchups more, and I think something like this makes more sense. And then you want to try to figure out the follow-up matchups later after you figure out your blue-black matchup. And that's a theory that I extend to every deck that I play. We'll talk about that more when we get into the deck lists for other decks and stuff, mono red specifically. But I do think a lot of people just are my blue-black matchup's good enough, I'll be fine. And I guess that's kind of historically been a thing in Legacy forever, right? Oh, I have a good Delver matchup, right? When you don't have a good Delver matchup.
Yep.
But that's the end of what I'll say about Mono White. I'll stop dunking on the deck. Sorry to all the believers out there. I am truly tired of trying to appease people and saying Mono White's probably fine. You can get away with playing. It's very clearly playable. I can't argue against that. Someone took it and went 8-2, right? It can win games of Legacy, matches of Legacy. I cannot, with any good conscience, endorse that people play it if your goal of the in a given event is to win. I cannot endorse that you play mono white for other options.
I would like to second that. I know that, you know, there's a lot of attachment to being a. I think like both emotional attachment to being a deck without dual lands, and also like there's obviously the aspect of like the accessibility of the deck financially has always been nice that you didn't have to dump a bunch of money on reserves list cards to get to play Legacy. Um, and I hope that at some point we can we can say that mono white feels like a strong contender for best version of this deck. But as it stands right now, unfortunately, we just cannot say that.
Yeah, I will never tell someone that, don't play, like, for financial reasons. Don't go out and like buy yours. I feel bad for all the people that like went out and bought scrub lands. Then I'm like, maybe we should play red white now. And then suddenly people steer and have to go buy plateaus or whatever. Like, stick to your guns, play what you enjoy. But I, as a Death and Taxes content creator, if you want your best chance of winning games of Magic, then I would strongly recommend some of the other lists that we were showing off. I guess one thing we didn't mention between these two is the difference in like Ghost Quarter, Rashadenport, but that's getting into the nitty gritty stuff of mono white that I don't really have strong opinions on. I think my instinct is that Ghost Quarter is probably a little bit better. Rashadenport is not a very playable Magic card anymore. Unfortunately, Rashadenport is like one of the real feel good D&T cards that you really love playing, right? It's just you turn 1 Aether Vial, turn to Rashadenport feels like Death and Taxes. But like the mixture of Ghost Quarter plus White Orchid Phantom against a deck that has like one basic land does make some sense.
Yeah, I'm a historical Ghost Quarter disliker, but I think that's where I would probably be as well, for the same reasons you mentioned. I think Port is probably better against the matchups that you are more comfortable with, and you just kind of need Ghost Quarter for the matchups that are not so comfy, namely Eldrazi.
Yeah. All right. We got a couple other lists that I will try not to talk about too much because I don't have like super strong opinions on them, but I will share how I feel about them. These are a couple more lists that I pulled from Eternal Weekend Japan. This list went 7-3, blue-white Death and Taxes. Yoshiwada played a very similar looking list. It's got like 1 or 2 flex slots changed and then has a sideboard that I was very confused about Yoshiwada's choice of sideboard, but blue-white D&T, this is an archetype that I actually did test a little bit. I've tried 2 different versions of this deck. One like before like the Drake plus Felia tech was thought about. I tried it like very early on in the post-grief meta, a blue-white D&T list that just played like, Assimilation Aegis, Meddling Mage, a couple of the blue cards, and like the big draw was Consigned to Memory, something that we harped on earlier, was just like your cheap interactive spells, your powerful spells that solve problem matchups are the true reason you want to splash colors ever, right? Thoughtseize, Red Elemental Blast, in this case Consigned to Memory. We've been complaining about Eldrazi for like an hour or 2 already. Consigned to Memory is like the best card. Everyone's playing it in their sideboards to beat Eldrazi. It's a card that makes sense to me. It's also notably missing from Yoshiwada's list, which is why Yoshiwada's list is very baffling to me, is that you would splash blue and then not play the best possible blue card.
Notably, Consigned to Memory was the most played card at Eternal Week in Japan. Just straight up the most played card.
That's extremely funny. I didn't actually know that.
Or sorry, I think most played Modern Horizons 3 card.
Most played Modern Horizons 3 card. That makes a lot more sense. I would say, yeah, because like the number of Consigned members can never beat the number of Brainstorms, right? I guess except for this deck specifically, but
I feel like there's probably like almost no other like non-cantrip decks that are playing it. Yeah.
Yeah. But the big draw to this, I think, outside of Consigned to Memory, which I think is a very powerful tool versus Eldrazi, is this Gilded Drake Felia Wombo combo. People have been doing this a little bit. There was the Jeskai Vile deck that won the Legacy Super a few weeks back. That was pretty much like blue-white Vial plus Magus and Bombardiers or something. The Felia Gilded Drake combo is pretty powerful. Like I've tried it out a little bit. I found it to be a little bit clunkier in Death and Taxes. I don't love that both Felia and Gilded Drake are very like situational cards that you're not very excited to cast by themselves, and do like have a lot of great synergy together. But when you have one piece of the combo and you aren't a Brainstorm deck and you can't either like dig for the second half very well or brainstorm away the bad half, I've just found myself like not wanting to cast Gilded Drake a lot against my opponents that are trying to kill me. Like I would Gilded Drake a frog, and then it's like you're never allowed to like jump the frog and discards 2 cards and block the Gilded Drake, because if they have any removal spell, you just get annihilated. So you've stolen their frog, which is cool, but then you've also given them a 3/3, and so many times I'd be like, I just wish I had killed their frog instead. I don't need this frog in play. I wish I had killed their frog and not handed them a 3/3. I was dying to a lot of Gilded Drakes when I was trying blue-white D&T stuff. Meddling Mage is a fine card. It's a little hard to cast, probably because I'm bad at guessing the cards in my opponent's hand. But it's like just a fine disruptor 2-drop. Harbinger of the Seas is blue, which is unexciting, but I think you probably want to put one in a blue-white D&T deck just because it's really powerful tutor target. I don't understand why these decks have Aether Channeler in them. This card is not legacy playable. Get it out of your decks, please. This is the epitome of the thing I was talking about with Direfleet Daredevil, is like, we get to play cool, flashy splash cards. This card is cool and fun and does so many things. This card is not good. Just don't put it in your deck. What are we doing with this thing? Assimilation Aegis, on the other hand, opposite end of the spectrum. This card's very cool, and I love it, and I would put it in blue splash decks very easily, because I love Stoneforge Mystic King for removal spells, and this one in particular is really nice. You can steal a lot of creatures and copy them. Very good when you Assimilation Aegis a Nadu, and you get to get your own Nadu triggers. Hull Reacher is whatever, is fine.
Cryptic Coat, someone mentioned that. You could play it in a blue splash. I don't think I feel like Cryptic Coat is probably consistently like the third equipment I would get, and I'm not really interested in putting it in my deck, mostly for that reason.
Yeah, especially with like Formal Wear now, you have like a 3-mana equipment that like makes bodies and is good when you flicker it, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I played this deck in I didn't play the Gilded Drake version. I played like, originally I was like trying to solve the Eldrazi matchup. I was like, blue-white D&T, sideboard 4 Consigned Memories. We'll try this. I played it in a Friday challenge. I went 2-4, and I beat Eldrazi twice, and I lost to not Eldrazi 4 times. So a bit of proof of concept that, Consigned Memory, shockingly great against Eldrazi. My beef with it is that the blue cards don't fix like anything else, and don't make your matchups like good versus other stuff at all. Like, your blue cards aren't very good versus Nadu or Delver or Reanimator or just any of the other decks that I was expecting outside of very specifically Eldrazi. And Gilded Drake would help a little bit with that, right? Stealing a bunch of big creatures is nice. Even like stealing a Nadu sometimes is, it's a little dangerous if they have like Caracas or whatever, but stealing a Nadu or a frog or a big reanimated creature is all well and good. But I don't know. I found the consistency to be a little bit lacking in the Gilded Drake Felia combo stuff versus like what you just the raw power of what you were getting out of the splash cards in either black or red.
Yeah, and one thing I think it's also notable about this list and the blue splash in particular is that I think the blue splash is the deepest strictly in terms of the number of cards that you could tell someone that you're splashing for. And have them be like vaguely legacy playable. And I just want to head some questions off at the pass, kind of speaking to the Cryptic Coat point earlier. Like, if you can think of a blue card that you would like to put in this list, feel free to do it. Some people talk about Lavinia, some people talk about Soul Herder. There's there's that Changeling from Modern Horizons one that like makes it one more expensive for your opponent to target your stuff. Mariner. Sunland Mariner. Yeah, if you want to put those in your deck, that's fine. But yeah, Unsettled Mariner. Thank you so much. Yeah, the point is like those are not the reason to splash for these colors. You splash for consign, and everything else comes along as a bonus. And if you want to play them, feel free, but I'm not going to necessarily give you my opinion on them.
Yeah. I will give you my opinion on them in that they're probably better than Aether Channeler.
There you go.
But yeah, we'll try not to. I've already talked about this list too much. I don't see the vision. Worth noting, Yoshiwada went 1-4. I mean, splashing blue for all the bad cards and not playing the consigns, it does kind of add up to me that you would not have a lot of success playing a bunch of cards that I don't want to play and then not playing the cards that I do want to play. So it does make sense. All right. And lastly, a little sneak peek. I guess the Akaleth viewers in chat have already got a little taste of this on Sunday, but we have one special list that we've been cooking up a little bit, which is Black-White Overlord of the Balemerk D&T. This, for those of you that watched Akaleth's stream on Sunday, he tried this out. It plays a lot better than it looks. I was extremely skeptical. I guess before I really dive into this, I'd have to shout out a bunch of people that told me to do this, because all of my best ideas are stolen. I've stolen Emperor of Bones. I've stolen the Red Splash ideas. None of them are mine. I'm not a creative Magic player. I stole this one from Bob Huang, who stole it from Jeff Lynn, I think. And Bob and Jamie both yelled at me to try this. And then I did, and I was like, wait a minute, this is actually like kind of... It feels powerful. The synergy between your 2-drop package of Felia and Emperor and Overlord is... I cannot understate it. It is, like, gives you a ton of card advantage, a ton of board presence. It has felt really good, and like I'm curious enough that I will definitely be experimenting with this stuff more going into the post-formal wear meta. I have no idea. This is a very loose deck list that I like 4-1'd with, and then I sent it to Akaleth, and then he changed some cards and then played it on stream. So like this is nowhere close to what the end result should look like, but like I don't know. This is definitely less of a meme than I thought it was when I first thought about it.
Yeah, I think the one thing that this list really fixes for me is like the problem of what happens when you cast your Felia and it gets removed. I think the density of 2-drops that are both a reward when your Felia lives and a way to put pressure back on them with Felia again really makes that 2-drop package just feel really good, like you were saying. Overlord and Solitude definitely goes off. Overlord is also hard castable. 5 mana is a lot, but we hard cast Solitudes all the time. And yeah, I really was surprised at how coherent this deck felt. Probably like I would say the two main problems I had with it were Overlord milling your equipment kind of sucks because they're just gone forever. That's not a deal breaker because like if your Overlord is really milling that much, then you probably have like so many resources you don't need your equipment to necessarily win the game. The other thing I was feeling is that like it, while powerful, feels like it probably has the exact same weaknesses that Black-White already has.
Yeah.
I don't know, like if you are able to assemble the Felia Overlord combo, then maybe being able to Solitude Eldrazi every turn for the rest of the game is sufficient. But yeah, it doesn't feel like it's really doing anything crazy different. It's just doing something very powerful, which certainly is valuable on its own, but I'm not sure. I'm just not sure about it yet.
Yeah, it definitely has a lot of room to still be tested. I've played like I think 3 leagues or something with it. I know you played the league on stream. This is a very work in progress sort of strategy that I am interested in, but I'm not signing off on this. Please don't cite me when you're going and buying your foil Overlord of the Balemerks, which are shockingly expensive. I've already checked. I guess the card is playable in standard or something. I don't know what's going on over the fence there, but It is very cool and it feels very good when you're doing it. When you get to do the I had a game where I got to go turn 1 Vial, turn 2 Felia. My opponent kills my Felia. I go turn 3 Overlord, get back the Felia, Vial in the Felia. It's just like just going off. It's really nice when you just put your opponent under like the Overlord plus like Solitude, just kill everything they play for the rest of the game. It does a lot of cool stuff. It also plays like Overlord milling you a bunch, plays really nicely with Pre-War Formal Wear, which is a card that I've not gotten to put together with the rest of this deck. So like maybe when you get... I have 2 in this list where we usually have like 1 in black-white, just because I think, A, like you mentioned, if you mill over your like Formal Wear, it's nice to have the second copy, and then B, I think Formal Wear just works a little bit better with this deck because of the Overlord synergies.
Yeah, you'll basically never have a yard that doesn't bring something back.
Yeah.
That was the big problem with cutting. That made me cut down to 1 in black white. Was that like, especially with Emperor Bones bringing stuff back, sometimes your Formal Wear is just kind of dead.
Yeah. I'm definitely excited to try this more as time goes on, but God knows if this will be a great deck or just a flash in the pan meme, and then I'll go back to regular stuff. All right, we've spent far too long talking about all these different deck lists. All that is to say, play black white or black white red or red white. Don't play mono white. We'll leave up. I guess we'll start pulling up some other deck lists because we're going to be talking about the matchups, how we feel about D&T overall versus a bunch of the expected decks of Legacy right now. And how we feel about the different splash lists, which splash we'd rather be on in matchups, stuff like that. I'm not forgetting anything, right?
No, I think
those are my next step.
I think that's what's coming up next. Yeah,
we should maybe do some play point giveaways right now.
Oh yeah. Let's do that while we get some water.
We'll take a little break. Let's do a play point giveaway. Shout out to Daybreak Games for those of you that play Magic Online. I and also Akaleth are both MTGO content creators, so we get these play points that we get to give out at every 5 giveaways per month. So we're gonna do one today, 120 play points. What's the buzzword? Let's just do Toodle, number 2 DLE. Type Toodle in the chat. I'll put it on the screen as well. Giveaway. Type Toodle in chat. Get your Toodles in for 120 play points, courtesy of the fine folks at Daybreak. Also, cannot stress enough how great it is that they managed to get the Fallout cards on Moto as early as they did. I can't sing the praises of Daybreak enough for how much they've done. I imagine that if WotC was still under control of Magic Online, we probably still wouldn't have the 40k cards.
Yeah, I cannot. It's annoying that it's taken this 7 months or whatever, but oh my god, I was worried we were gonna have to wait another year and change, and I'm glad that we're getting it like just in time to be testing for Eternal Weekend, because that is
so
like,
nice that we get to test important with like mostly real Legacy now. There are the Fallout cards that are still missing. Sorry to PVDH, did I say Fallout cards? The Doctor Who cards that are missing. PVDH, the only Doctor Who believer, Sibylline Soothsayer or whatever it is. That card's cool. I would definitely like try stuff with that card.
Yeah. The other nice thing is the Fallout cards are coming in treasure chests too, so it's not like you have to just dump $40 on a precon to get a single card. Like we had to do with 40k. So
yeah. So hopefully that means like not limited time, where like 3 years from now, Triumph of St. Catherine's going to be like a bajillion tickets or whatever.
Yeah.
The Pig Next Door, it will not be a trade of, we're not going to give you directly the play points. You get a code to enter in on Moto whenever, so you're free to use that code whenever you want. I will just send a code to whoever wins. Single-handedly bringing me back into MTGO. How expensive for more likely to be when drops? No clue. It can't be more than like 40 ticks, right? Because that's presumably like the cost of the precon. I don't know what else is in that precon that's worth anything.
When 40k dropped, it was weird because there were definitely times that the Triumph was like 50-ish tickets. I think because to a lot of people, 50 tickets was less money than $40,
Which
and
that,
I sort of get that.
yeah.
But yeah, I would assume the virtual cap is 40 tickets, and it'll get lower if the drop rate in treasure chests is low enough to meaningfully affect the supply. So
Yeah, I imagine it'll probably be the most expensive card in the set, just because
yeah,
it's the only one of the only playable ones.
yep. I think it's like there's like five that I can probably name, and Formal Wear is the one that has. I think Formal Wear is the only one that is a staple in a good deck right now. The
And like,
rest are all like fun cards to
yeah,
play in decks that either didn't exist before or existed but were not good.
yeah. I think it's the one, maybe the only one that's like actually has like proven like results in high level events. Like I think Curie had something in some event that got published, but like, I forget how big it was. But it's like a cool
Yeah.
StifleNought card, and then Lumbering Mega Sloth was a card that like Depths players were like memeing about. I don't know how real that card is. Rampaging Yao Guai is probably a lot worse than it maybe was when we were thinking about it in like March. I think just like not a lot of Saga decks around anymore, not a lot of 0 mana artifacts that you're nuking.
Yeah. And I think the only one I can even think of is like Pip Boy, but again, not that many Saga decks, and I wouldn't play Pip Boy in my deck unless I was playing Saga and cared about like looting or whatever that card does. I've already forgotten.
It untaps at one land. Whenever you attack, you either put a 1/1 counter on your guy, you untap a land, or you do a third thing.
Secret third thing. Yeah, okay. I remember they land on tapping because a lot of people were like
You
it
you go off a
means that you can get
Saga.
yeah, extra Saga constructs. Yeah.
Untap two lands? No way. That card doesn't untap two lands. Oh, does it? Yeah, because the Lost GT untaps one land, I think. Maybe it is
Oh
untap
yeah,
two
it does
lands.
untap two lands. Oh, it does loot. The loot is the secret third thing, so I wasn't crazy about that either.
Does it like, is it draw a card, discard a card loot? Not like discard
Yeah.
one. Okay. We don't get to like,
Yeah, loot, not rummage.
yeah, or not like the cool rummage where you get to just draw cards if you're hellbent, like the Spear of Leonidas.
Oh yeah, unfortunately not.
Sort inventory, draw a card, then discard a card, pick a perk, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature, check map, untap up to 2 target lands. Cool. I've let this giveaway run for too long. People have already forgotten about it and stopped typing, so I'm going to end the giveaway before I get distracted. Winner is Haps. Haps, please type something in the chat so I can whisper you, because your message is gone. Oh, there you are. Hello.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how cute is the spear? The spear is, I think, a solid like 8. Um, well, Cassandra and the spear are very fun cards to play. I would
Yeah,
be pretty happy to take them to an FNM just or a weekly or whatever because like they'll make some really cool moments that aren't totally embarrassing. But I did not find those cards to be worth the space in the deck. I intend to eventually get Cassandra's to have one though because I actually really like the showcase frame
yeah.
for the Assassin's Creed cards. And I also just really like the art for that Cassandra too. So
Yeah, Cassandra was a very fun card. I don't believe in its power level, unfortunately. Like, it kind of goes hand in hand with like a lot of the D&D stuff that we were actually talking about, where it's like your inevitability doesn't matter as much as like your your ability to like play to the board in the early and mid games as much. Just like Cassandra's a
yeah,
cool card when you're in a like super grind fest where you're just like really like top decking against like a control deck on like turn 20 or whatever. But like those games don't really happen, and Cassandra doesn't. None of the modes interact. Just
yeah. I think to you spoke to this a bit earlier, but like you know I think it's true that we're still a very powerful end game deck, but the value of that end game is in making sure that the game that like once you have answered the first barrage of spells that your opponent's doing, that you have it from there. It's not like you need that engine to be going on all cylinders. you really just need Yorion to blink like one thing and you feel like the game's over at that point. So
Killmaster. I'll take this one question just because it is something that's been on my mind, but we'll get into the back half of the state of the noodle after. There's been a discussion about whether or not Mom is any in D&T lists right now. I think that is something that people kind of overlook. I've been like fine with Mom in my lists. There's actually no Moms in this like Overlord list that I have right now, just because I was like trying to cut cards to fit everything in. I do think that Mom is like pretty weak against two of the more top decks of the format in Blue-Black Reanimator and Eldrazi, and that's like a pretty big slight against the card in general. I do like that she both like fills out early curves where you don't have Vial, and also protects a lot of like the key twos, which are very important, especially in like a list like this where you like Mom into Felia is like a really strong curve, right, where you get to actually protect your card that's going to generate all your card advantage and stuff. And like the other cards that you would play in the places, like I know specifically Kill's referring to playing the modern package, Guide of Souls, Ocelot Pride stuff. I've tried a lot of Ocelot Guide of Souls stuff, and I just have been very underwhelmed with those cards as a whole. I don't see the vision on them, and I'm certainly going to continue to try them, especially like they play nicely with like pre-war. I keep wanting to say plate armor because I keep looking at it. It starts with a P, but they're like cards that play nicely with pre-war formal wear, and I'm gonna like try shells like that again. But I don't know. I've not been impressed with those cards as like replacement level 1-drops or anything.
I think some people in chat are speaking to it. I think Mom definitely isn't the best card, not only like in against specific decks in the meta, but also just against like the speed that Legacy has now. But I still think it is a it's im- it is important as a way to make resource exchanges happen early in the game on your terms. And that is something that we don't have a lot of tools to do to achieve that. I mean, Luendel's joking about how Thoughtseize is so close to Mom. That's exactly why Thoughtseize is so powerful in the black deck, because it's a way to exchange one for one early in the game on your resources, or sorry, on your terms. The reason, you bring up Giver as like, Giver of Runes could theoretically be like more powerful against Eldrazi in particular. The main reason I don't really believe in that is because Giver of Runes is not an of Runes card. It's it's more of a benevolent bodyguard, in the sense that like you have to answer the Giver before you kill anything else, but you can deal with it whenever you want. You don't have to kill it right away. And I think that's the main thing that Mom does so much better than Giver, is it forces the issue immediately. If your opponent lets you untap with Mom, it's an additional complication they have to deal with for the rest of the game.
Yeah, and like if Eldrazi were a bigger chunk of the meta than say like the blue-black stuff, then I would definitely be more inclined to play Giver. I've registered Giver before in Legacy. That was back in like the Renin 6 era though, but like I've come around on like I used to hate Mom versus like Scam in the Grief days. I was cutting all my Moms post board, but I've come around to keeping the Moms in because they are like a pretty good like playing against some of the fair stuff that they always like to do. Like Mom blocks Barrowgrave a hell of a lot better than Giver does, right? If it's your only creature, you want to be able to protect your in-play Lion Sash or your Spirit of the Labyrinth and stuff, and like they're like these decks do interact with you, especially in post-board games, like a pile of Brazen Bars and Fatal Pushes, and like the blue-black tempo deck especially is just kind of like, Bowmaster and Fatal Pushes and Brazen Borrower and whatever sideboard cards and stuff like that.
Against Painter, your opponent has like 6 red blasts they could turn on with Painter, in addition to three bolts and however many furies. Yeah, I think like there's a lot of pushes around, and Mom makes those pushes have to go against her instead of the cards that matter.
we can set this aside if we want to go back to it for a Q&A. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds here in the middle of the stream. Let's find my stuff. All right, let's talk about the legacy meta. Let's bring up, in light of my lack of preparation for this event, because my internet went out, I did not actually pull up stock lists of all of the decks that we're going to talk about in the meta today. We're just going to look at use Goldfish instead, and look at these truly miserable looking numbers of blue-black in the format, and harp on the reason that people need to be respecting their blue-black matchup more, because it is like, it's just how much frog in the meta. Isn't there's like Grixis down here too somewhere? I forget, but like people are casting
Eldrazi.
Yeah, people are casting Psychic Frog way more than they're casting any other spell in this format right now, and like we need to be prepped for that.
Yep. So I'm gonna start by addressing Reanimator here, blue-black Reanimator. It feels like we've been talking about this deck for 11 months, and it's pretty much because we have. This deck is still very strong after the Grief ban. I think the matchup in some ways got worse, but mostly got better with the Grief ban. I only say it potentially got worse because sometimes your opponent would grief you instead of always going for the Entomb lines, and now there's really no reason for them not to go for the Entomb lines in game one. This matchup otherwise isn't really that changed. They do have Thought Seizes in place of some of the griefs that were cut, so you have to be prepared for that. A very recent addition to this deck is Metamorphosis Fanatic, if you want to mouse over that. This is the miracle card that reanimates something and gives it a lifelink counter. I don't think this card really matters that much from a D&T perspective. Like, when I look at this list in particular and I see that they're only on 2 animate deads because they're trying to make room for Metamorphosis Fanatic, that feels like a huge win to me, because it means that like the turn 1 Entomb into turn 2 huge thing kill you lines are just not as consistent. Metamorphosis Fanatic requires brainstorms to set them up. They can certainly have stuff like Troll of Khazad-dûm in their graveyard that they just cycled away to kind of like reanimate that for free. But other than that, basically all of our removal is exile based, so they're never like rebuying something that you've already answered. And so for that reason, I don't think that Metamorphosis Fanatic is really it's a card you need to be aware of, but I think the inclusion of that card is mostly an improvement for us. When it comes to, playing the games, in game one, you just kind of pray you don't get entombed. You don't really have many answers to it. If you have the time, you get Lion Sash online, and if you can ride Lion Sash, you can usually ride Lion Sash to victory, so long as they don't just frog you to death. Post-board games, you have a lot of graveyard hate as long as you're respecting it. Grafdigger's Cage is amazing. You have a lot of extra removal to play the long game. An important thing that'll definitely color your experiences with this deck is, and we sort of alluded to it before, is how does your opponent sideboard against you? Basically, every Reanimator list has a fair plan that they can sideboard into, where they're bringing in like Barrow-goyfs, extra Brazen Borrowers, extra removal spells, Orcish Bowmasters, things like that. I have seen all the extremes here, to the point where I've played against people who board out their Entombs and their Animate Deads to just bring in 3 drops to cast. And I understand why people make that choice, because we do bring in a lot of graveyard hate. But if your opponent does that, you should cheer and never tell them to not do it, because it's really good for you. It basically just turns them into a blue-black tempo deck, except Grafdigger's Cage is still really good against them because they can't cut all of their reanimates, and they have Metamorphosis Fanatic on top of that too. So yeah, if your opponent's just trying to cast Barrow-goyf against you, you got them. You're good. In terms of like the different decks that we've been talking about, we're gonna focus this mostly on the black build, the red build, and the mono white build. I won't list black, white, red specifically because you can basically assume it's somewhere in between black and red, whichever direction it makes sense. Like if Magus is not so good, then you lose something because you put Magus in your deck. If Magus is good, then you get the idea. We originally played the Black Splash because it was good against Reanimator. It's still really good against Reanimator. The crazy amount of Reanimator is a big reason why Black White is still a really good deck. Red White is not too much worse. The fact that you have more Pyroblasts for Psychic Frogs and to protect like your hate spells from counters is also really nice. And like you mentioned before, the ability to turn the corner with a Johnny and Broadside Bombardiers means that you get to shorten games and not have to play like a stressful draw go kind of game like we often do against Reanimator from the black white perspective. So, unfortunately, mono white doesn't really bring much to the table here. As long as you have the sideboard cards for it, you can still probably do pretty well, but you have to respect this matchup more from mono white than you do from the other builds.
Yeah, when you put 4 Felias and 4 White Orchid Phantoms in your deck versus this, you're not gonna be super excited. Um, they have 2 basics. It takes a really long time before you can convert those into like real stone rains. This deck also plays very well off of very few lands, especially they're not in like the hard cast grief days anymore. So like the White Orchid Phantom stuff is just really not where you want to be.
Yeah, if your opponent puts no pressure on you and they get both their basics out and then you get to ghost quarter them or like port them and cut them off of a color, then like sure. If your opponent's doing that, I think you can win regardless of which build you're playing.
But yeah, the best blue black reanimator players will try to be a reanimator deck against you and will try to just entomb reanimate you on turn 2 and kill you. You will very often see your opponents go turn 2 Frog, turn 3 Barragoy for whatever, and you will be ecstatic. You can win those games a lot more often. You're a deck that just has truly an uncountable number of removal spells in your Plow, Solitude, Recruiter of the Guard, Skyclave, Apparition, whatever, blah, 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 deck. This, like, the rough game is game 1, where if they have the good hand, you're very unlikely to beat it. Black Splash gets a little bit better there because you can have the Thoughtseize to try to break that up. But usually it is mostly like step 1 is try to get Lion Sash online as soon as possible. Step 2 is you just coast from there. You're good if you get Lion Sash and play with untapped white mana. You're bad if you don't.
Yep. Or if you play Graph Digger's Cage. Graph Digger's Cage also great.
Yes, post-board games where you have a pile of graveyard hate, much nicer because you don't just stone die to the turn 1 entomb turn 2 reanimate stuff. You get Graph Digger's Cage or Ghost Vacuum or Fairy Macabre, stuff like that.
Yeah, and one nice thing about Graph Digger's Cage also is that like it sucks when they have a bunch of frogs, but the frogs drawing cards matter a little bit less when Cage shuts off the scary part of their deck. Obviously, I can draw them to like Brazen Borrowers to get them out from under it, but like I've had plenty of spots where like I have to take a hit or a 2 off of a Psychic Frog because I like got my Cage down, but then my removal spell got countered, and those games are still surprisingly playable.
Yeah.
Moving on to another blue-black deck, we'll look at blue-black tempo here. This is
cool users. Yeah, this is
skip. Yeah, skip. It's a cool user list. Abort.
This is gonna be like very not stock. This looks right.
Joyful Waffle. Joyful Waffle use it.
Yeah,
it plays pretty normal lists. Yeah, this is a very different kind of Psychic Frog deck. But this matchup's great. Whichever build of D&D you're playing, you should be ecstatic if you run into this. We are already pretty well structured to fight tempo decks in general. This is one of the slower tempo decks we've ever seen, between the fact that Tamiyo does not deal damage. They basically only have one real 1-mana threat in Nethergoyf, and holy shit, it is so nice to be able to block my tempo opponent's threats, because for a long time with like Delver DRC and Murktide as the tempo triad or whatever, blocking just never happened because everything flies. And that is much less the case versus blue black. Other nice things are they don't have lightning bolt, so they can sometimes have a hard time pushing in the last few points of damage. Um, they have the Nethergoyf, like the bonus of being able to like rebuy it rarely matters because it's almost always getting exiled. Um, if your opponent's like attacking with Tameo and spending mana cracking clues to draw cards, that's perfectly fine. Um, it's just them spending more mana on not putting pressure on you. Once you have enough land drops in play and all your spells resolve, the game's just kind of over. It's a really good matchup.
Yeah, I like when I first started playing against like these like more fair blue black decks. And I was playing against turn one Tameo, and I was like spewing a bunch of resources trying to answer it, like plowing into days and like firing off a bunch of solitudes and stuff. I played some games where I like didn't have the answer to turn one Tameo, and I watched it like attack me like 3 or 4 times, and then I got to turn 9 or 10, and I was like, why haven't I lost this game? And the reason was because I wasn't at like 8 life from my opponent casting a 1-drop and attacking me a bunch. D&T is so much better at handling your Delver opponent drawing like an extra 3 cards or whatever than it is when, you know, they're trying to race you down and kill you. Because like the grand thesis of the state of the Noodle is always like D&T has one of the best like end game chokeholds in the format. Like you can go toe to toe with like a couple of extra cards off of Tameo because your deck will also generate a bunch of card advantage, while Delver inherently like doesn't really do that outside of Psychic Frog. And specifically like this Delver deck has felt the most one-dimensional that a Delver deck has felt in a long time in terms of just this is just a creature deck. If you have removal spells, they don't have like a juke plan. You're not gonna like keep a hand of like 4 plow, 3 land or whatever, and then your opponent goes like Expressive Iteration, Mystic Sanctuary, Expressive Iteration, like bury you in card advantage without putting things into play. This Delver deck needs stuff in play, and if you just point and click removal spells and everything, you're golden.
Yeah, it is very good and very simple for the most part. And sometimes your opponent plays a Tameo and you have a Crocus in your hand and they don't have a Wasteland, and then
Yeah, it's the old Ragavan days.
The old Ragavan days. Yep.
Yeah, I back in like the Ragavan era, I would just snap keeping Crocus cans because it was just like a spell.
Yeah,
it's a little bit looser versus Tameo because if you go like turn 1 Crocus through Tameo and then they go untap turn 2 Crocus Brainstorm or whatever, they need to flip their Tameo, and it's a lot more threatening than Ragavan. But like D&T also has a decent chunk of answers to a flipped Tameo. You can flicker it with Flicker Wisp, you can exile with Skyclave. The red deck can Pyroblast it, stuff like that.
Yep.
It is not the most threatening card in the world.
It definitely is not. In terms of builds you want, I think black, white, and red, white are pretty close. I think I give the edge slightly to black, white because being able to do stuff like rebuy Solitudes with Emperor Bones is really good. Just Thoughtseize as well, also always a really good card. I do board out some Thoughtseizes versus these decks, mostly just because the deck is really strong. Like I just don't really have much else to board out. The one nice thing that the red splash gets is Pyroblast means that you have a cheap answer to a flip Tameo, where in black white you have to either kill it with damage, which is hard because of the Tameo's +2, or you have to Skyclave it, which can be tough into a daze depending on how fast they flip the Tameo. So
yeah, I would agree.
We'll give and take there, but I think both builds are great. And mono white also strong here. The way D&T exists as a deck, regardless of which colors you're playing, you're going to have a good matchup here.
Yeah, just another matchup where you probably don't want to be doing a lot of White Orc and Phantom stuff. But
yes, the island and swamp are in every deck.
Yeah, quite unfortunate. But yeah, I think black gets a little bit of an edge there. Specifically, like we talked about, this deck is just a creature deck, and you just want to initiate the D&T endgame of kill everything on site, lock them out, which black-white is inherently a little bit better at doing, has more value stuff. Your stuff like the Ajani plus Bombardier package is like a little bit worse, because Delver's a really good deck at punishing you for trying to like have these synergistic creatures that need to like, you know, attack and have another thing in play to activate. Sometimes you have a Bombardier without any fodder, sometimes you have an Ajani and like nothing to like activate it, just kind of sits in play. But notably, Nethergoyf means that your Ajani gets a little bit better than versus something like Grixis, where they just have a bunch of flyers, because, Ajani is good at gumming up the ground, something that we'll talk about in some of the future matchups here. But yeah, I think, this is just historically, D&T has been a good deck against Delver, and I think this is one... It's weird to say one of the weaker Delver decks, because that's, like, not true. I guess maybe one of the weaker Delver decks versus D&T specifically is more correct.
I think it is the... Like, it's probably cemented itself as, like, one of the 3 best Delver matchups we've had, thinking of the other 2 as Modern Horizons 2 Ragavan Delver and 2013 Rug Delver.
Yeah, that sounds pretty correct to me, yeah. Like I said, like, yeah, D&T's matchup against Delver has been worst when they have things that aren't creatures to put into play that kill you. Ren and 6, Oko, Expressive Iteration, I'm sure.
Dreadhorde Arcanist, kind of.
Yeah. Dreadhorde Arcanist is definitely more threatening than Psychic Frog.
Yeah.
Alright. Let's go on to everyone's favorite matchup that we definitely haven't complained about enough yet. Eldrazi. Is this a good Eldrazi list? This looks like pretty stock to me.
That looks like the most normal list I've seen, yep.
Yeah. This looks pretty fine. Yeah, it looks like it won a challenge. So yeah, seems pretty normal. This is the real elephant in the room for Death and Taxes right now. I think this is the real reason, like, if you don't want to be on Death and Taxes, this is really the reason why. This matchup is rough, and we really haven't cracked it. We've been struggling against it since post grief ban and pre grief ban, but like it was just a lot less of a meta relevant thing back in the grief era, because grief was the only deck in the format. This deck just has a lot of cards that you struggle to interact with, and they just go over the top. This deck has a really unfortunate vice script for D&T of it has an extremely powerful early game with a bunch of, like, it just makes a bunch of mana and casts a bunch of gigantic things ahead of the curve, and you need to keep up with a bunch of removal spells or else you get run over and die. And it also has this really obnoxious end game where they can just make mana and just crush you with Ivugin plus a bunch of lands. So you have to walk this tightrope of, like, you need to not die to, like, the early Fleshraker, ThoughtKnot, take your removal spell, Myco Spawn, double Stone Rain you, stuff like that. I mean, we've talked about Myco Spawn a bunch, but, like, Myco Spawn is the real problem here, is that, like, this card punishes you for trying to, like, play your long game and hit a bunch of land drops. They just, cast this card for 6 mana and blow up all your shit. Or cast this card for 6 mana, blow up your stuff, and then also go 2-drop Ivugin, and then, start pumping mana into that. Kozilek's Command, also a card that you have real no recourse of interacting with outside of casting Thoughtseize, that just either just kills your thing, makes a bunch of mana so that they can do that stuff that I was just talking about, or, like, scry 6, draw a card. This card is exceptionally obnoxious with Ivugin, where if you just get the if you just select the spawn and draw, or spawn plus any other mode, it is, like, essentially free. They get to just, like, chain. I've had games where my opponent just went, like, Kozilek's Command for 6 into, Kozilek's Command for 6 into, they've scried through, like, half their deck to find their, like, Myco Spawn to double Stone Rain me on turn 4 or whatever. It's just, like, it's kind of a nightmare.
And then as soon as you think that you start stabilizing, that's when they top deck Devourer of Destiny and they kill your creature, and then they just start attacking, and then you die.
Yeah. It's bad, but, like, it's not. We're whiny, we're complaining about it, but, like, I don't think it's, like, it's not nearly, like, your least favorite matchup in the room. It's, like, your least favorite popular matchup in the room, certainly, but, like, it is very winnable. I have won it a decent amount. Like, I don't, track my win rates or anything, but it's definitely not, like, Doomsday percentages or whatever. It is a creature deck at its core. You have decent stuff that interacts with a lot of what they're doing, not all of it. Kozilek's Command, so and Myco Spawn are the problem cards.
Speak for yourself. I think my Doomsday win rate is way higher than my Eldrazi win rate.
Yeah, maybe it is just a me thing. I find that sometimes the matchup is close, and then also sometimes they just, steamroll you. But, this is, like, the big all-star matchup for the Red Splash. Not only is, like, Magus your big haymaker, that is hard for them to answer. They need 5 mana off their Kozilek's command, or they need to have their Dismembers. I've been leaving Mother Friends in the deck over Spirit of the Labyrinth, specifically to protect your Magus from Dismember. But not only does Magus play a huge role, but a Johnny is really good at gumming up ground board states. This deck just has a bunch of ground piddlers and one Null Drifter, I guess. So you do get to, either stop them from attacking or trade off your cat token to flip your Ajani. And then Bombardiers plus Ajani is obviously this very good engine at kind of point and shoot, kill everything in play with a bunch of bolts and shocks. It also lets you turn the corner, something that we were talking about, where if you just sit on your hands and you've solituded your opponent 3 times and they're at 26 life or whatever, and then D&T needs to slowly turn the corner and try to end the game, and then they just, hit their 7 mana Eye of Ugin and then start casting Null Drifters and Devoured Destinies and sowing Mega Spawns for the rest of the game and you die or whatever. But, Bombardiers does help just kill them when you need to just kill them. And sometimes they have like a very Ancient Tomb reliant hand where they're taking a bunch of damage. And you can swiftly turn the corner with like huge damage swings off of Bombardiers, especially like Bombardiers plus Solitude attack is 9 damage, right? Stuff like that. I have notably playing the Black Splash a little bit. I have found that Thoughtseize is actually kind of nice in this matchup. The fact that you can interact with these cards that I'm complaining about by taking them out of your opponent's hand and not letting them cast them is very nice. But the rest of your black cards, not super thrilling. As for mono white, this is a matchup where you would want to be mono white. This is, especially now that they're on 1 basic, the Felia White Orchid Phantom engine really wants to hum here, where you get to actually Stone Rain them down instead of them Stone Raining you down. If you can finagle that game state without them just killing your Felia and halting all your operations. Even your first White Orchid Phantom, while not being like an actual Stone Rain, is often takes them down on mana, right? If you target an Ancient Tomb or an Eldrazi Temple, it converts the 2 mana land into a 1 mana land, and then from there, every other time you Stone Rain them, you do get to start converting very nicely. Definitely a reasonable matchup for mono white, but the format is as a whole, you're really enticed to reach for these splash colors. Anything you want to add to that?
I don't think so.
You can be mad about sowing Mega Spawn for a little bit, maybe.
God, I fuck that card to death, dude. I hate it so much. Also, every time I wasteland an Eye of Ugin, the second copy, every time the second Eye of Ugin teleports to their hands.
Yeah. That's how it works.
Yeah, it's just I agree with you. It's probably not the worst. My personal win rate really against it is abysmal, and every match is just the least fun I've had that night.
Yeah, I get it. That all adds up to me.
In other words, we can move on. I'm done talking about Eldrazi.
Yeah. All right. Next up on the list is Nadu. Nadu comes in 3-ish flavors right now. We have Nadu Breakfast, we have Nadu Zenith, and we have Nadu Elves. Nadu Elves, I'm not even sure if I can find a list, because that deck has really kind of dropped off. It was really popular at the start of the meta, but has kind of fallen away, but we'll talk about it. I'm going to try to break down each archetype, starting with not Bant Nadu, Nadu Zenith, whatever you want to call it. Nadu Zenith, not the most helpful moniker, because the Elves deck also plays Zenith, but whatever. It's just like Bant mid-range stuff with Green Sun Zenith. It's not like the all-in Elves deck. It's not Breakfast. It doesn't have the Breakfast cards. Hang on, technical difficulties again. Get out of here. Hey cat. You want to get out of here? No? Alright, whatever. She's not on the desk anymore. Bant Nadu. This is a fundamentally control, mid-range, whatever you want to call it. It is a deck that has really taken a lot of the meta share from the Uro Beans decks, kind of. Where your engine is just, have Nadu and Nomads, draw 100 cards, win the game that way. You have, your 1 Uro or whatever, but you've kind of foregone all the other card advantage cards in favor of in favor of doing this bullshit. Which, honestly, fair. It's kind of bullshit.
Notably, this is a Yorion list that we have up here.
Shoot,
I think those
most lists
are
not Yorion.
Yeah, most lists are not.
Let's try to good call. I didn't even clock that.
Yeah, I know it's a thing, but I think it's generally.
All right, this list looks more stock. All right.
Yeah, that looks right.
Yeah, this looks good. Yeah, they have Nomad's Nadu, and they have a bunch of like Green Sun Bullets, Safekeeper, Leovold. I've seen is mostly stock in these lists for whatever reason, and then Uro, removal spells, Teferi, a bunch of Delighted Halflings. This card is kind of obnoxious even for us. If we're playing Pyroblasts. But the way this matchup goes is it's not my favorite matchup in the world. It's definitely, it's not like bad. I don't think it's not Eldrazi. It is just a bunch of you want to be able to kill all your opponent's things. It is a kind of point and click and try to turn the corner matchup because of the inevitability they have from piecing together their A plus B combo. You kind of need to have a plow or a blast or a solitude in your hand basically all the time, so they can't just untap and kill you off of 2 cards. It is a very dangerous matchup in that regard. This is a matchup where I really, really like the red splash. Almost all your red cards are good. Magus, a little bit lacking versus the 3 basic deck, and they're pretty incentivized to fetch out their basics against you if you're not on like the White Orchid Phantom stuff. I've lost my train of thought because dog keeps maneuvering around here. But the red cards, Pyroblast is huge. Pyroblast is like the reason. Pyroblast versus Nadu is the reason I like the red cards more than anything else. Nadu is a really obnoxious card, and being able to answer it, actually, trade for it at even card advantage. You don't need to target it with a removal spell and let them draw their card. You have instant speed ability to counter it. You can, but it also has the versatility of you can target the Nadu if it sneaks into play while you're tapped out, while you don't have a Reb, or if they Delighted Halfling or Green Sun Zenith it into play, you can still multi-use on Pyroblast. We go back to the Ajani Bombardier stuff. Similar to Eldrazi, this is just a matchup where you want to turn the corner. You do not want to give your opponent the leisure of sitting there sculpting as you try to assemble your your Yorion card advantage engine. When you cast your Yorion and draw 3 cards, it's like pretty good. And then they untap and they cast Nadu Nomads, and then they draw 8 cards, 12 cards, whatever. It is not a matchup where we have the luxury of sitting on our hands and being this late game inevitability deck. So the Ajani plus Bombardiers dual purpose removal spells on creatures and also ability to just go face and turn the corner is really, really nice to just get them dead. The Black Splash, similar to versus the Eldrazi matchup, the Thoughtseize is nice. Especially, you can obviously take pieces of the combo in the early game before we get to like these top decking wars with low resources. Emperor of Bones, less nice. You can pair it with your Solitude, but they aren't killing a lot of your stuff ever. They are casting Swords to Plowshares and Prismatic Ending primarily. So you really have to make your own Emperors work. None of the other black cards really do anything. This is a matchup that we've talked about. Something like Bowmasters would be kind of nice. It's worse for this deck than stuff like Elves or Breakfast because of the number of things with 2 or more toughness that they have in the deck. You could play a card like Opposition Agent or Plague Engineer, stuff like that. There are black cards you could reach for if you were more worried about this matchup. But again, this matchup is like fine for D&T. It's definitely not a nightmare. It is a matchup that you do need to respect, and that is one of the big reasons that I've been trying to play red-white, is because this deck is very popular. It is probably, I would say, probably easily the 4th most popular deck right now, or at least the 4th most successful deck right now after like the 2 flavors of blue-black and Eldrazi. And I guess finally, mono-white. Sorry to the mono-white believers, but man, your mono-white cards just really aren't doing it in this matchup. Like,
they blow chunks, sorry.
Like, White Orchid Phantom versus 3 basics. You have no like good interaction breaking up the combo. Like, mono white players were on Stone Brain and the Pith and Disruptor Flute. Flute's a good one. Pithy Needle's a good one. Those are good options for this matchup. But like, holy, your options get better when you reach for other colors. Yeah, I have seen people like put Phyrexian Revoker in their deck to try to beat Nadu.
I would feel better about it if they weren't playing 4 Swords of Plowshares. But yeah. In addition to the Teferis. Yeah, I agree with everything you said, pretty much. I think my win rate against it is very bad. I think that is mostly an extension of just not respecting it as much as I should, which is why I mentioned sort of at the top while we were talking about the deck lists that I'm kind of interested in finding room for something like a Pithing Needle in the black sideboards. To have a little bit more fuel here. I expect this deck to pick up a bit too because it had a very good weekend just this past weekend. Like personally, in the 5K that I played in, there were three of the 4 Nadu players there top aided. But in addition to that, Nadu, all of these are Zenith, by the way, specifically Zenith. 3 Nadu Zenith there. Nadu Zenith top aided Eternal Week in Japan. And Brady Monroe just won the DMV Legacy Invitational with Nadu Zenith. He, I think, lost 2 games in the entire tournament. So this deck is strong, and I think I am surprised it hasn't been played more than it has already, because it seems very good.
Yeah, it's hard to understand the whims of the blue players sometimes. Sometimes I feel like they're just like blue players get locked into casting the best spell in the format because they're already brainstorm players. They're like, we gotta cast Frog. We gotta cast like Frog's the best creature. Like, why are we not playing Frog in our deck? But like, there are other choices. I would definitely. This is definitely one of the decks on my radar that I want to respect. One of the very big draws to the red splash, specifically getting cards that help you turn the corner, getting cards that interact a little bit better versus Nadu, stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Second Nadu deck. Breakfast, is this stock? This looks pretty. Larson's a known breakfast enjoyer, so this is probably,
this looks very normal to me.
It's probably very stock. Nadu breakfast. The breakfast matchup used to be really nice. I used to love it because D&T was just a shit pile of removal spells, and you just got to point and click at everything. They were a creature-based combo deck, and you just got to just demolish them. The black splash was good because you had Bowmasters, and this deck was really bad against Bowmasters. The red splash is good because you had Pyroblast. This deck's really bad against Pyroblast. Mono white was less good because you get the idea. I don't want to keep beating that drum. But then they got Nadu, and the matchup got a lot worse because obviously this card is very good against removal spells, and when your plan is to cast removal spells on everything in play, Nadu is very good at making that plan really shitty. And the dual tensions of like you do kind of want graveyard interaction, or like when you're playing against breakfast previously, it was just like, oh, you just always Stoneforge for your Lion Sash or whatever to make sure they can't combo you. But now are like, do you Stoneforge for a removal spell to try to like maybe break up the combo but slower, but also be able to answer a Nadu? Do you Stoneforge for Lion Sash to break up the breakfast piece of the combo? The dual plans of attack that they have is pretty annoying for a deck like D&T. So this is a matchup that has definitely gotten less pleasant. I have not played against it enough in recent memory to feel confident saying like, oh, I feel favored against it, or I don't feel favored against it. It is the only thing I can say about it is that it's definitely gotten worse. Nadu is a very good card, obviously, but this is this is going to be a pattern in every single Nadu list. It's just like, this is another good shout for the red splash. Blast good, removal spell is good, turning the corner good. I don't want to keep reiterating the same thing over and over again. Do you have anything you want to add? Black-white thoughts?
Nope, I don't think so. Yeah, I think Thoughtseize is probably at its best versus Breakfast in particular because it gives you the knowledge of like what's scariest in the moment. But other than that, yeah, I think it's funny. I think the one time I've played Nadu Breakfast recently was on the red splash, and I was like, hell yeah, I got Pyroblast, I'm fine. And then they just like played a turn 2 Coward of Souls, and I was like, okay, game's over. So that I guess that's something that you'll want to be mindful
Yeah,
of. If
that
you
is
play
something
the
that I
deck.
got when I wanted to. I got second place in a challenge like a month or so back, and then I got by a one of Cavern really badly. I was like, oh, I like double Pyroblast my hand. How do I lose? And they just Caverned me. It was really tragic. I'm trying to find a reasonable Nadu Elves list. This one is definitely a little oddball. Got this Torsten and some Progenitus
It
stuff in the sideboard.
This one's close enough.
This
It's
one's
fine.
close enough. They usually have like Sword Splashers in the sideboard. Wait, no, this one isn't close enough. They don't have the white card, the nomads.
Oh, this is actual just elves. Okay, they're playing
They're
Elvish
just
Herder.
elves with Nadu. Yeah, where's can I? Maybe this one. This one's old. This is like July 22nd. This is the same list. It's got the Torsten and everything. All right. Well, you guys are just gonna have to believe us that this deck exists. It's real. I don't have a good link for it, but it is. It's also this one doesn't even have Court of Calling. Wow, I really feel like a liar, huh? Any of these decks have Court of Calling? All right, this one is closer. Yeah. All right, this one's at least a little bit closer. Don't look at this sideboard. I don't know what these Angel's Grace Stifle things are doing, but this list makes more sense. This is what I would generally think about as stock Nadu Elves. This was more of a popular strategy at the fledgling era of the post-grief meta. Is a deck that was like a pretty popular breakout deck. It has since faded away from grace. But it's still a deck to keep in mind on your radar that it is out there as another viable elf strategy outside of the green black cradles of the world. This is just very turbo all in, try to Nadu you, backdoor plan of Craterhoof, but they generally don't even have natural order. They just have Green Sun plus Court of Calling because you can Court of Calling for the nomads. As well as the Nadu to complete the 1-2 combo and just go off from there. This is a matchup where your Red Splash is at his worst because obviously your Red Elemental Blast is really bad against the almost entirely mono green deck. With like 8 ways to get Nadu into play through your blast, right? You can't just counter the Nadu when they just Green Sun or Quarter calling it for it like 66% of the time or whatever.
Or 12 if they have Shepherd in their deck and put it into play.
Yeah, if they've outsourced Shepherd too. Your removal spell, your red removal spells are obviously good. You assemble the Ajani plus Bombardier's combo, and you get to point and click, kill everything. But this is a matchup where you're certainly as happy, if not more happy, to be on the black splash because you get to interact with cards like Thoughtseize. You get to double up Solitude with Emperor. This is a matchup where you also get to lean heavily on Grafdigger's Cage specifically as your 1-mana graveyard hate of choice. Happens to be extremely good versus this deck. They generally don't have a lot of ways to answer it. I typically see a 1 of Boseiju in the main deck in the mana base, and then like a low number of Force of Vigor sideboard generally. Force of Vigor has been like a little weak in the Legacy meta with the presence of Vexing Bauble in most of the good artifact decks. So, like, Turn 1 Grafdigger's Cage will shut off a bunch of their deck, and you can feel a lot safer knowing that they're less likely to put together the 1-2 combo and try to kill you that way. Not a ton else to say about this matchup. I think it's not great. I think it's my least favorite of the Nadu matchups. I might like it more than the Breakfast matchup just with like 3 cages in my sideboard, honestly, but it feels close to the Elves decks of old where they can just overwhelm you pretty early, but D&T lately has a ton of spot removal, so you can keep up sometimes.
Yeah, I think I honestly feel like from just personally, it's the one I'm least worried about specifically because of how weak they are to Grafdigger's Cage that I know I have a bunch in my board. I think the game 1 is definitely the worst here of all of them, but I think it's the matchup where we improve the most post board by far. So I give this one a slight edge for that reason.
All right, that is up to me. We will backtrack through all these elves lists I clicked through and try to find Painter. I will let you
There
take
it
this
is.
one away because after I check to make sure this list is any good.
This looks pretty normal to me. Yeah,
Pretty
we're good.
stock. Yeah, I think the big thing is that some of these decks don't even have the Devourer combo, but for the most part, this looks like fairly locked in. I'm gonna run to the bathroom. You can talk at your leisure about the Painter matchup.
All right. Yes. So painter matchup is good. I think there are you may hear differing opinions on this one, but I feel pretty comfy playing into painter with basically any build of D&T. A couple things that to point out that have been very popular in painter recently are first off, a high number of vexing baubles in the main deck, usually 3 to 4. Those cards mostly don't do anything against us, although certainly it can matter sometimes if you're not able to evoke a Solitude to kill a painter in response to like a Grindstone activation, but that doesn't come up super often. Um, most lists are playing Agatha's Soul Cauldron in the main deck. Um, that I think is sort of almost certainly motivated by the fact that there's a whole lot of Reanimator out there, and it's just a way to have some main deck graveyard hate that also plays well with, for example, being able to, if you Soul Cauldron a Welder that died to like a Fatal Push or something, then you get to turn your Painter's Servant into into a Welder, things like that. That's really cool. Ultimately, doesn't matter a whole lot against us because again, most of the most of our removal is exile based. There's not much stuff that's getting destroyed. So Soul Cauldron mostly just puts +1/+1 counters on your opponent's stuff sometimes. Um, the scariest things are mostly, this matchup has always been about like finding the balance of answering what the fair things that your opponent is doing without completely exposing yourself to the Painter Grindstone combo. Um, I don't really think that has changed very much. You know, I think generally I lose to a huge pile of fables and sagas more so than I do to Painter Servant plus Grindstone. Um, it's hard to say, which you should care about more because it's going to involve situational awareness on your part. But generally, I'm pretty happy when I find myself paired against Painter. And obviously, Painter has been getting a lot more popular recently because it kind of free rolls a good Eldrazi matchup. Because when Painter Servant names a color, it turns out a lot of the stuff in the Eldrazi deck cares about the fact that the creatures that you're casting are colorless. So if you give them a color, things start looking a lot worse for them. Because of that spike in popularity, a really easy way for D&T to adjust to that is just to throw an Emrakul in the sideboard, so that your opponent can't just grindstone you for free. They usually have like a Soul Guide Lantern that they're going to keep in their deck, so that it turns it into like a 3-card combo instead of a 2-card combo, but certainly still much happier to deal with that than just Painter Grindstone. Um, the Wrath of the Skies in many of the sideboards that we were looking at are a fucking house against Painter. It really is so insanely good against them. I've even when you cast it for like 3 and blow up half your board, um, it usually does way more damage to Painter than it does to you. A lot of times you get to cast it for 0 and you'll blow up a Saga, 2 constructs, a Petal, something else. Like there's just Wrath of the Skies is just so good. But yeah, it's mostly a matchup that's trying to make like putting you to the test on having removal, and that's a test that we have been good at for a very long time. If I had to rank them, I would put Black White first, just because Thoughtseize is great. Emperor Bones is also quite good. It's free graveyard hate for stuff like Welder and when they like engineer the Chaos Defiler into their graveyard or whatever. Mono White is not that far behind because White Orchid Phantom is great against every Urza Saga deck, and you also now have 4 main deck disenchants with the 4 Witch Enchanters that are going to be in your deck. Red white is at best as good as mono white because the pressure of Mamba and Ajani to turn the corner is also very good, but the red cards don't do anything here. Pyroblast and Magus are both quite bad, unless you board in Pyroblast specifically because you know your opponent's going to be naming blue with their Painter Servant, but I'm guessing that you do not do that.
Yeah, I tend to not do that unless I really don't respect my Painter opponent. Sometimes they will just like snap name blue every time, but I find that in a lot of post-board games, they just are generally naming red. I assume that you are correct and shared all great opinions for what I'd missed. I don't have a ton else to add. The Emrakul thing, I think, is something to think about going into Eternal Weekend specifically. I think this is... I would put this at my top 5 decks of the format right now. It'd probably be like Scam, Blue-Black, Tempo, Eldrazi, Nadu, Zenith, and Painter as the top 5 right now. So this is a deck where you can free roll an Eldrazi or a Gaia's Blessing in your sideboard, just to get that free huge percentage boost. I'm not sold on it because, like you mentioned, I do think this is a pretty good matchup, despite what all Painter players tell me. Every Painter player I've ever met told me that G&T is a buy, and they just kick the crap out of every time. I don't get it. It's just a deck that doesn't have a ton of card advantage ability, and you're a deck with a bunch of removal spells. That's about it.
I think the only real unfortunate part of this matchup right now is that it's hard to find the room for the Lauren in the main deck that we've been playing for a long time.
Yeah.
And Lauren is absolute house against Painter.
Is there any reason to run Emrakul over Kozilek or Ulamog? Emrakul is better if your opponent casts Show and Tell. Kozilek and Ulamog are still uncastable. That's about it. Well, we move on from here.
To be clear, I think that's like half a joke. It is literally true. It will basically never matter, but you should just play Emrakul because I think Emrakul is actually the cheapest of the 3 of them anyway because it's been reprinted more.
That might be true. I don't actually know that, but
yeah, don't quote me on that. But
it is mostly because you get to board it in against the odd Show and Tell deck, or like when Reanimator was casting Show and Tell back in the red-black days.
Yeah.
It's also banned in EDH, so the price is lower.
Right, of course.
Genius. I don't know how I forgot about that one. Yeah, if you only have an Ulamog or a Kozilek, it's fine. You just play whatever. It doesn't actually matter. They're all the same card. You can play a Gaia's Blessing if you really want to, but that one has the downside of you can't discard it to hand size. All right, let's move on. Let's move on from Painter. Let's get to Moon Stompy, which is my second beloved deck in Legacy. For those of you that have been watching my stream for a while, I was on a big Moon Stompy kick for a while in the pre-MH3 meta. To be perfectly candid, I don't understand how this deck is doing as well as it has been doing online. It blows my mind that this deck is at all playable, because my devout deck building principle is respect your tempo matchups. Respect Psychic Frog. It's like 35-40+% of the meta or whatever. By God, we should probably open up the Eternal Weekend winning list instead of this random mono red list. But this is the list I wanted to complain about. This list is at least a little bit better looking. So I'll use this list for now before we swap over to the other list. But thank you, Inner Materials. This deck is just truly so confounding to me that we've decided that we're going to register not only for Pyrogoyf for the One Ring, but for Caves of Chaos Adventure in the Days Force of Will, Reanimate is 25% of the meta or whatever format. We are not trying to resolve our 4-drops were really bad against Delver. This deck is built around the ability to cast 3-mana spells. Everything that is more expensive than that is increasingly hard to actually resolve, and like you just need to be respecting your tempo matchups. The I have like a bunch of articles and a bunch of streams where I've talked about this at length. So like I don't understand why this deck is built the way it is. Regardless, it is seeing some level of success. It has, won several challenges, done well in several challenges. It won Eternal Weekend Japan, right? This is the first place list? Yeah. This list, notably, a little bit more sensible because we've cut these stupid Caves of Chaos Adventurers. We are just playing the Pyroglyphs and the One Rings. The Vexing Bauble edition over Chalice Void makes a lot of sense to me, though. I do think that this is the correct direction to go. Because unlike D&T, Moonstompy is a deck that cares a lot about your opponent casting Force of Will. So you can Vexing Bauble into your dumb bullshit cards, then it is very good versus you Chalice in your dumb bullshit cards. And yes, they can't cantrip, but yes, they also still can Force of Will you. I really like Vexing Bauble a lot in this deck, and it makes a lot of sense to me. We've cut the stinky Caves of Chaos Adventure for a 3-drop. I don't really know why we're on 4 Lelia specifically, but more power to them. I just have not committed a lot of brain power to Moonstompy at this point, because every time I've tried Moonstompy, my opponent casts a Psychic Frog on turn 2, and I instantly lose the game. I don't understand how this deck ever beats Frog. Every deck's on like 4 or 5 Power Blasts on the sideboard for how bad the Frog matchup is. Ghost Vacuum is also a cool card that I've tried a little bit in Moonstompy that makes some sense as kind of a Unlicensed Hearse stand-in. It's just this graveyard hate card that you could also like have this big late game power swing with. Pyroglyph is a card that is really powerful. I had some mixed success with it, but I can't speak to it with any sort of confidence because I have not cast the card enough. But it is really good with Fable. It's good with itself. It is a very threatening card. The ability that it goes face or kills things is very powerful. Much like a normal Tarmogoyf, it is a card that it can easily just be a 4/5, just like this enormous Flame Tongue Kavu that can also punch your opponent in the face, sort of thing. This list definitely makes more sense to me, but I still would not register it in any good faith expecting the format to be like 40% Psychic Frogs. You lose so much equity when your opponent just casts Psychic Frog on turn 2, and you just have like no recourse at all to try to beat it. I don't get it. But that's enough of my complaining about that. We can talk about the D&T matchup, which is unfortunately the more bullshit greedy cards your opponent plays, the worse your matchup is as Death and Taxes. Fully don't think this is a good matchup anymore if your opponent is playing a list like this. Your matchup gets better if they cut some of the stupid 4-drops, 4 cards like Lelia or Gobbled Rabblemaster or what have you. But if your opponent's just registering 4 Caves of Chaos Adventure, 4 Pyroglyph, 4 the One Ring, then I actively don't think D&T's matchup is good anymore, which is wild to say because D&T used to treat Mono Red as a buy. But this is just... It's very sad, and I really hope that the Mono Red players start shifting their decks more towards respecting the blue decks, because I don't want to keep losing to them as D&T. But I do think the way that this deck is structured, it's very good against everything that isn't casting Daze, but Daze is like 40+% of the meta. So I really think these decks should be structured a little bit more respectful towards the blue decks, which will in turn affect the rest of their matchups negatively. So there is that trade-off there. But yeah, these 4-drops are just an absolute fucking nightmare for Death and Taxes. Just do not take this matchup for granted. I don't think there's a lot you can or want to do in terms of like sideboard respect. That Needle that we keep talking about kind of comes into play because the One Ring is probably their best card against you. Just like this infinite card advantage and D&T is not a very good pressure deck that we've harped on that for 3 hours by now. D&T is not good at pressuring you. One Ring just draws them like 9 cards or whatever, then they bury you. You want stuff like Skyclave or Pithing Needle or a Spirit of the Labyrinth, generally protected with something like Mother of Runes to try to keep up with stuff like that. I think that's about it. I don't have a lot else to say other than like this matchup is not a buy. This is actively a bad matchup. The more stupid 4-drops that they put in their deck. Please, if Moonstompy players, if for some reason you're 3 hours into a D&T talk stream, please make your decks better against Scam and Delver. Oh yeah, I guess we should talk about the color, the splashes real quick. Red white actively, you don't want to, like, red white is the worst by far. We can harp on like the turning the corner thing, but like your mana base is bad. Your red spells are bad. Bombardier is the only like reasonable card in your deck. Mono white, your mana base honestly like is a little bit worse than it used to be because everyone's playing four flagstones for like White Orchid Phantom activation and stuff. So you can still get Blood Moon sometimes. Four White Orchid Phantom plus 4 Witch Enchanter has taken up a lot of the basic plane slots in mono white. So your tools are a little bit worse there. This is another matchup where your White Orchid Phantom's kind of complete garbage. But your mana base is more respectable. I might like black white more. I'm not sure if I like black white more than mono white in this matchup, but like if your opponent has a bunch of stupid 4-drops you can't interact with, Security Blanket Thoughtseize is always there for you. That's about it. That's all I have. I guess. I mean, in the black white vein, Emperor Bones also a pretty good card in this matchup. Stealing like a Pirate Boy for a Fury that ends up in the graveyard is really nice, especially Fury that puts itself in the graveyard quite often.
I've done that multiple times, and it's always sick.
I think that is about it for the Moon Stompy matchup. We can go on. Next up on the list, we got how many decks left? We got 4 decks. That sounds about
yeah.
Most of the meta. Next up is Doomsday, everyone's favorite matchup. Do we have Romario? Romario's a trustworthy. He might be playing Turbo. No. Okay, cool. Stick with this as stock. Keep getting Stolen
Right.
Fury passed by Gone. They're not playing as many Gones lately, at least. They're like usually 2. Yeah. Anyway, take it away.
All right, Doomsday. This matchup has always been bad. It's still not great. However, we do have one saving grace. If Eureka is still around, I don't know if they're still watching, but they revived DDFT under a new acronym, Doomsday Frog Tameo. As we can see, this Doomsday list has 12 creatures in it. I guess technically 8, because the 2 Thassa's Oracles and 2 Street Wraiths don't really count as creatures. But yeah, basically this is trying to take the turbo aspects of Doomsday, slow it down a little bit, and have a good plan B fair game for when they need to be doing that instead. The nice thing is that the stuff that got cut for those are, I don't know for sure. I know that at minimally there's no personal tutors in this list anymore. And that was an important card for Doomsday being able to consistently Doomsday you very quickly. I believe there's maybe fewer thought seizes as well, something like that. I don't remember.
Yeah.
I don't want to say 100%. I know what was cut for it,
We
but
can compare it real quick to like Wonder Pro's list. He's probably on like stock Turbo or something. He's experimenting with some Vexing Bubble stuff, but yeah, like the Lion's Eye Diamond. Sometimes they have some number of Cabal rituals, personal tutors. The Consider that usually pairs with the Lion's Eye Diamond for like the low resource kill.
Yep. So yeah, anytime a combo deck cuts any card for any creature that they want to stay in play, that's regardless of how small a benefit it is a benefit for us. So you have the possibility, particularly in game 1, to be playing against a Doomsday opponent that has a hand that just happens to play pretty fair. And honestly, it's not that the speed at which your opponent casts Doomsday is a very important aspect of what makes this matchup really bad, because we can't do anything once the Doomsday has resolved. But if you are able to make the game take a little bit longer and like get creatures into play and make it so that your opponent casting Doomsday and passing the turn means they might just die to your couple of creatures in play because they just have their life total, now you're talking about games you can actually realistically win. The post board games will certainly not be as good because this is not a deck that we have sideboard cards for. We've never really sideboarded anything thinking about Doomsday because this matchup is not really fixable unless you're a sicko and want to play Angel's Grace or Archive Trap or whatever. But I think in terms of like Doomsday deck construction, this is probably the best the matchup has ever been. Still not great, but I think this more so than ever, I want to emphasize that like I think it's really easy as a D&T player to just immediately like see yourself in the getting food bracket as soon as your opponent like shows you that they are on Doomsday, whether it's like cycling a Street Wraith or playing the Doomsday. But this matchup is winnable. It's not 100-0, even if it's like I don't even know if it's a 70-30. Like it might be better than that. I'm not going to put a number on it. But my point is, my inspirational speech to you all out there is to don't just give the game away because you run into a bad matchup, because these games on average are probably way more playable than you think they are, even if they're still pretty bad. In terms of which builds you want to play, I would say black-white is the best because Thoughtseize is your most coherent interaction with them. And that's pretty much it. Red-white is still quite good. It can sometimes be difficult for your opponent to cast Thassa's Oracle into a Magus of the Moon unless they have prepared for it because they only have the one basic island. Pyroblast is good interaction versus their creatures as well as their cantrips, their counter spells. It makes your opponent have to think about the pile that they're making because they have to actually consider whether they have room to put a Cavern of Souls in their pile to beat a Pyroblast on the Thassa's Oracle itself. So it adds some complications there. So yes, and the clock that red puts on your opponent also makes it so that passing the turn, unless they're literally just going Ritual Doomsday turn 1, definitely looks a little bit scarier than usual. Mono white has none of that. It's still just total dog. Again, please play to your outs with these matches because you can win them. But you will be playing from behind without the power of the cards you get from the splashes.
Yeah. Worth noting that Eureka, I chat with Eureka a fair amount, as much of a Doomsday player as he is. And he has mentioned to me that he thinks that that red white is the hardest to play against. Given all the different cards you have to play around versus black white is just D&D with Thoughtseize. Thoughtseize is a good card at interacting and stopping them from comboing, but I guess harder versus more difficult I guess that's not the best language. It is a more difficult matchup to play around the cards. That doesn't necessarily make the matchup any worse or better, I guess is the best way to put it. I'm not sure which is better between black white and red white in terms of raw win rate, but your opponent's in a tougher spot when they put Doomsday on the stack and they're like, okay, I have to think about red elemental blast, I have to think about Magus the Moon, and I have to think about broadside bombardiers, whereas black is better at stopping your opponent from putting Doomsday on the deck because you cast Thoughtseize, but once they get to that point, it's mostly home free. It's a lot of the same as classic mono white stuff after you put the Doomsday on the stack. There's a little bit of counterplay with some haste, some burst damage with Emperor of Bones, but not a huge deal for them.
Yeah, but it is important, even if the red cards don't make the matchup better on paper, that extra mental drain on your opponent can induce a mistake sometimes. That's totally real.
Doomsday's a really hard card to resolve. If they they can play around. They're sitting there thinking about, all right, I can beat this, I can beat X, Y, and Z, and then you untap and you're like, oh, you're at 9. Broadside Bombardier attack, Solitude, chuck it, 9. You out of nowhere. It's like, dang, I didn't build my I didn't plan for this. I planned for the 4 other things. So it is very important to play to your outs, especially post Doomsday resolving. trying to deduce what their pile is to find your best course of victory is something that I don't do as much as I should. In leagues, I find myself mentally checking out a lot when they put Doomsday on the stack. Just like, I'm like 98% dead. I could top deck like Spirit of the Labyrinth into Broadside Bombardiers exactly to win this game, but I don't want to sit here for 5 minutes while my opponent makes their pile. It is a very demoralizing matchup, but definitely a matchup where you want to like play to those percentages and like making your opponent build out their whole pile, and then like, turning your like 10% ability to win that particular game into like a 12% just by like virtue of having all of these cards that they potentially can't think about. Worth noting also, real quick, Mono White does have White Orchid Phantom at least, which was better when they weren't playing 2 basics. I think the turbo lists might be on like 0 to 1 basics.
I think they've always had 1 island.
They've almost always had 1 island. They don't always have the swamp, but Wonder Pro's list is at least on the 2nd swamp. So like,
okay,
White Orchid Phantom's still not that good. It does shuffle their Doomsday pile and sometimes Stone Rain them if they don't think about White Orchid Phantom when building their deck, when building their pile. Then you can sometimes get a Stone Rain out that way, but red card's very good, Thoughtseize very good, etc. Alright, let's go on to Cradle. Is that even gonna be... Oh, here, can I just go to like... Can I just go to like Newton? What's Newton's at? Does anybody know? Not his at. What's his moto name? Is it just Hello Newton?
Hello Newton, yeah.
Just find whatever.
No underscore.
No underscore. I see. There we go. This is probably stock.
That looks pretty normal to me, yeah.
Alright, do you want this one, or should I talk about it?
I'll let you start.
Alright. So, Cradle Control, as Newton likes to call it, elves at some point, black-green Cradle. I don't really know how to describe this one, but it's what elves mutated into when Newton took his group of heretics and departed from the Church of Glimpse of Nature and started playing Elvish Reclaimers and slowly mid-range-ified the deck into what it is now. Lately, this deck has been on White of the Reliquary is the big new piece from Modern Horizons 3. At some point, he was playing Nantuko, Springheart Nantuko, but it seems like those are gone now. It is mostly just built around White of the Reliquary and more recent addition into the deck Sylvan Safekeeper along with that. Other than that, it looks very much like pre-MH3 lists. I have found this matchup to be very good as Death and Taxes for the reasons that any other matchup is good with Death and Taxes. The better the point-and-click plan is, usually the better the matchup is, and Newton's deck was never good at producing a bunch of card advantage. It played a lot of tiny little creatures, and you just wanted to shoot each one as it came into play and not let your opponent cast Green Sun Zenith, Creator of Behemoth, and smush you. You could often even beat Green Sun Zenith, or Green Sun Zenith for whatever. Natural Earth for Creator of Behemoth. You can often even beat them putting Attraction into play, drawing 4 cards or whatever, just because you just have truly so much removal and card advantage in your deck. That said, Sylvan Safekeeper, as well as Talon Gates of Madara, are both like pretty annoying little wrenches that can be thrown in the works in terms of the point-and-click plan. Sylvan Safekeeper especially is a card that is tough to answer, especially with a lot of the decks foregoing Umezawa's GTA lately, mostly mine at least. It's a card that I vaguely want in lists sometimes. It is a card that helps like respect Nadu a little bit, but GTA is a card that has really fallen off. Something that we didn't really talk about, and maybe we should mention. Maybe someone...
Yeah, I did actually mention that during the Nadu section, that Nadu is the main reason that I still have GTA in my lists right now.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's really bad versus a lot of the top decks right now, like Scam and Eldrazi, and very weirdly enough, Delver, where everything just has a bunch of toughness now. But it is very good against like the piddly creature decks whenever they exist, like this deck or like Nadu. Anyway, back on course. This deck now has 4 Elvish Reclaimer plus 4 White of the Reliquary as their land tutoring stuff. And now they have Talon Gates of Madara to protect their creatures if they have one of these creatures up and active. So it is harder to just point and click at everything. But that is generally the game plan. Just kill everything that moves. Don't let them get to the like natural order for Craterhoof lethals. Try not to let them get to the natural order Atraxas, but those are still at least a little bit more beatable. This is a matchup where where I really like the red cards because their deck is not very interactive. You can set up the Ajani plus Broadside Bombardiers combo, and then they really don't get any creatures to play for the rest of the game. Magus the Moon is it's like fine. This is a deck that is very built around Gaia's Cradle. That is kind of Newton's thesis, is that you play all these land tutors because Gaia's Cradle is super broken. So being able to turn that off is nice, but also they're a double basic forest deck with a bunch of mana dorks, so not the best.
You're turning off synergies, but you're not turning off their deck.
Yeah, you also do get to turn off Talon Gates of Madara, which is kind of nice.
Yes,
turn off their ability to tutor their counters to your removal spells.
I honestly hadn't thought about playing Magus against them until now, and I wonder if it's just close enough to good.
I would have to actually look at the list and map out the cards that I would be bringing in versus the cards I'm taking out. My guess is that I probably have to have Maguses in, but I'm not 100%. Hey, dog,
yeah.
Get down from there. The black cards. This is just another Thoughtseize security blanket. It is nice. Thoughtseize is kind of a removal spell if you stretch the definition a little bit. You trade 1 for 1 with your opponent's stuff, and eventually you card advantage them out of the game. So take the Green Sun that tutors the Sylvan Safekeeper, or take the Sylvan Safekeeper, or the Natural Order, stuff like that. Emperor Bones, nicer here than in some of the other matchups. Not the most exciting card. They're not super interactive, so they're not killing your stuff a ton of the time. But you get to double up your Solitudes. Graveyard Hate matters a little bit here. Weaken Elvish Reclaimers or weaken Why the Reliquaries. Occasionally you do lose games to Why the Reliquary beat down. I don't find it happens a lot, but sometimes you do get punched by some big whites, and it is nice to shrink them down with those Graveyard Hate pieces. And then Mono White, I don't have any strong opinions on here. This is just a deck that hasn't existed for long enough while I was playing Mono White that I have a lot of strong opinions here. Obviously, White Orchid Phantom is kind of nice at removing the Gaia's Cradles and stuff, but it's nicer when Magus prevents them from activating it versus White Orchid Phantom. You can only kill the Gaia's Cradle after they've already activated it once, and usually the first activation is pretty scary.
Having written an article about this matchup from a Mono White perspective, certainly multiple years ago at this point, I will say that this matchup felt fine.
Yeah.
At the time, the must kill every time card was Fiend Artisan. Now it's White of the Reliquary, but the dynamics haven't really changed. It's just you kill that card when it's on the board before it untaps. If you don't immediately lose, but things get complicated to the point that if you didn't have a removal spell when it untapped, you don't have one now either, and it's just going to keep getting worse for you. So
spiral out of control pretty quick.
Yeah.
This is notably a matchup that where I don't abide by Bolt the Bird at all.
Yes.
That is a big thing that I think a lot of people miss, and I think maybe a lot of the reason that some people think the matchup is worse than it is, or why Alice players think the matchup is better than it is. I find that versus a lot of decks as D&T, you don't want to Bolt the Bird, but I guess there aren't a lot of birds that I see play anymore. It's generally Maverick. This was a Maverick strategy that I was on probably 5 or 6 years ago, where I was what if I just stopped casting Swords to Plowshares on the turn 1 Noble Hierarch and just kept saving it for the turn 2 Knight of the Reliquary instead? Basically just built on D&T never finishes a game in any short order. Your opponent's always going to have time to hit land drops and cast all their spells. The mana dorks matter less. You want to save your removal spells for the cards that matter and just leave the lingering mana dorks until you want to clean them up with a GT or some more useless piece of removal, chainsaw of red-white or something. Save your removal spells for the cards that matter. This is a deck that has very core engine pieces. Obviously, there are points where you want to shoot the creatures to try to play around a natural order out of this deck versus something like Maverick, but it is a matchup that you don't always just want to go turn 1, plow your dork, go. because then if they untap and cast white, and you're like, well, I don't have my Skyclave on until turn 3, and then they're going to untap with a white and then kill you, versus if you just go land go, they play their white or whatever, you plow it on tap, you have a 2-drop, and then you curve into casting the Skyclave on future turns. It is an important thing to think about, because I know a lot of people are so locked into like Bolt the Bird, because that is just such like a it's just like a magic grinder term that it's ingrained in everybody's brains.
Yeah, I mean, to put it into perspective, like I feel that so strongly that I often don't even kill a turn 1 Reclaimer against Cradle, because like all Reclaimer does is ultimately is eventually make your opponent make more mana, and that's what the birds do. The Talon Gates definitely complicates that a little bit, because it eventually turns into a protection spell, but like if I only have one removal spell in my hands, I'm rarely using it on Reclaimer. I'm usually still waiting for white, because white is the card that is going to kill you.
All right. Next matchup is somewhere. Turbo Forge. This looks stock, probably.
It probably is. Doesn't matter. This matchup sucks.
I hate this fucking. We complain a lot about like Eldrazi and Doomsday. Low key, I think this matchup is probably worse than Doomsday is. This matchup just is miserable. It sucks. You don't have good hate cards. It's bad. It's gotten probably worse with Causeless Command. It's gotten a little bit better because they have Glaring Fleshraker. You actually have targets or removal spells now, but like, I hate this matchup.
Matchup sucks. The only saving graces are like you mentioned. If they need Fleshraker to stick around, well, guess what? We have removal spells. Their Vexing Baubles don't do a whole lot against us. Means that they also play a little bit slower, because they don't have nearly as many. They only have like the one Mox Opal. They cut Lotus Petal. I don't know what other zeros they were playing before, but yeah. Even if you could play something like a Deafening Silence, which our ability to find room for that dwindles every day, they still can just like kill you with Urza Saga. They can still just cast a One Ring and draw infinity cards and kill you with 3 Urza Sagas. This matchup's just not good. Just dodge.
Yeah, very much. This is this deck. I don't know if I've just been getting unlucky or this deck is picking up online. It looks like it is kind of picking up online. It's got like a bunch of 5-0s this past couple of days, showing up in the smaller challenges. Doesn't look like it has any like paper results yet. I'm hoping this is just a flash in the pan and it goes back to not being playable, because I hate this matchup and I played against it like 4 times in the past 2 leagues. It's extremely irritating.
I thankfully haven't seen it in a long time. I'm hoping it won't stick around. I hope that the annoyance in getting access to 4 Grim Monoliths makes people not want to play it in paper, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's really bad. This is like, we can talk about the color splash differences, but the answer is you're fucked in all of it. It took 2nd place in Eternal Weekend Asia. God damn it.
I hate that for us.
Maybe that's why I'm being lied to.
No.
Oh wait, maybe this is wrong. Nope, that's just regular.
Nope. No, that's Eldrazi.
Mystic Forge. Top 16. Not no results, certainly. What the hell? No, this is like Forensic Gadgeteer. This is like Blue Splash. This is a very oddball deck.
Yeah, I wouldn't even call this that, because this is weird.
Machine.
Yeah, it's not even Urza Saga deck. Yeah. Or no, sorry, it's under enchantment. Never mind.
Why is this even in the side? I'm confused. Stock lists are illegal in Japan. That is very true. But anyway, this is a matchup where like you really don't have good sideboard cards. If you really want to cast Stony Silence or whatever, you can, and then die to their turn 2 Karn anyway. But like all the cards that you want to reach for aren't very good. Like even Deafening Silence is just like so bad against so many decks right now. that you don't really want to reach for Deafening Silence. Deafening Silence isn't even like that thrilling versus this matchup. All your color splash options suck. The black splash gets Thoughtseize as the security blanket. You can pretend that that's good enough to, stop them. And then you Thoughtseize them and they have 2/4 drops, and then you lose the game. The red splash, you get Magus of the Moon to blow up the sagas. If you get a 3 mana, you can, Bombardiers and attack them. Mono White has White Orchid Phantom. White Orchid Phantom is just a stone red in this matchup. It's really nice. If you go like White Orchid Phantom, Failure, your White Orchid Phantom, whatever, you can like blow up a bunch of the lands. If you're not, dead by then. Especially if you put Vexing Baubles in your deck instead of Spirit of the Labyrinth. Spirit of the Labyrinth, saving grace of sometimes you cast turn 2 Spirit and they have a One Ring hand and they can't Kozilek's, if they don't have the Kozilek's going for your Spirit of the Labyrinth, and that can be nice. But yeah, this is the real dodge matchup. I would genuinely rather play against Doomsday than play against this deck, I think. Ugh. Just dodge. Let's move on.
Get it off the screen.
Yeah, let's get out of here. All right, one more matchup.
Now we'll do another matchup that's also not very fun, but one of the more playable, not fun matchups. StifleNought.
Is this stock? I have no idea what's stock in StifleNought. I mean, it looks stock enough.
The only thing I'm not sure about is whether main deck Tameo, or whether the Tameos are normal, but anyway, so StifleNought. StifleNought's been picking up quite a bit ever since Doorkeeper Thrall got printed. That's just gave them a much more it's basically the replacement for Torpor Orb. It does mostly what Torpor Orb does, but it is itself a creature that they can cast at instant speed. It also stops ETBs of artifacts, which
is really messed up.
It messed up for us because it means that our Cauldron doesn't come in with a germ,
and you can't kill it with a Phantom Blade or a chainsaw.
Or that's true. I haven't played against it since we played removal equipment. That's so fucking annoying. Anyway, okay, so this matchup isn't fun, but the fact that they don't have the literal card Torpor Orb in their deck changes so much, because usually when Torpor Orb got played, you could just go home. But now that their Torpor Orb is a creature that you can at least use Swords to Plowshares against, the game is a lot more playable. Notably, you do have to use specifically Swords to Plowshares against Doorkeeper Thrall. You can't use Solitude or Skyclave because Doorkeeper Thrall keeps Solitude and Skyclave from triggering. So you really need to conserve Plow for Thrall whenever you can. But the fact that their Torpor Orb can now be removed changes a lot for us, honestly. In addition, especially because you can like remove it in response to them casting a Dreadnought and just sort of 2-for-1 them that way sometimes. Stuff like that's cool. They do have a main deck consign to memory that you'll have to be mindful of, but it's basically against us, thankfully, just Stifle, but worse because they can't consign to memory your fetch lands. They can counter your Vial if they want to, but that's okay. Sideboard tools are the Wrath of the Skies we've been talking about, also great here. The curve is very low, so the fact that you can realistically kill a Doorkeeper Thrall and a Dreadnought with a Wrath of the Skies is very nice. You can't kill Null Drifter. That's unfortunate. Null Drifter, I think, is what definitely pushes this over the edge into a matchup that I still would call unfavorable, even if it's a lot more playable now than it used to be.
Yeah, the secondary like Dreadnought threat that is also card advantage is like really nasty. There are often times where you could just like, okay, they just have Dreadnoughts or whatever, and you can beat those with plows.
And it starts feeling a lot like how playing as Myco Spawn feels, where you don't get to make land drops anymore because you have to sack lands to the Annihilator trigger, so you're just stuck with however much mana you had when that started. So it sucks. I would like to play red-white the most, specifically because red-white has Bombardiers and a Johnny as extra ways to kill a Doorkeeper Thrall without using an ETB effect. That's very important. in addition to the Pyroblasts that are nice against this very, very overall blue deck. Black-white comes in second. Again, Thoughtseize is great. This is the last matchup, so I'd say that we won't say that anymore, but literally we won't say that anymore. Mono white doesn't if you are playing a mono white list specifically that has Velia in it, that's probably where you gain the most, because Velia is a way to get Doorkeeper Thrall out of play, even if only temporarily. And that can be really important for just getting rid of the Doorkeeper Thrall just long enough to answer the Dreadnought, and then you get to sort of move on with your life from there.
Yeah, that all sounds correct to me. A lot of people, I find, like, really hate this matchup as a D&T player. I find it's, like, not good, but, like, definitely not, like, disastrous. I think people just are bummed because sometimes your opponent casts Doorkeeper Thrall and your entire hand's turned off, and it just really sucks. And that's understandable.
There's a lot of non-games in that part sucks.
Yes, but you do have a lot of tools to play regular games of Magic against this deck. It, like you said, is much better than when they were playing Torpor Orb, because that card is almost entirely unanswerable as D&T and just was horrible.
Yep, we only used to have like Council's Judgments, and again, we don't have room for a 3-mana removal spell anymore. The format's just way too fast for that.
Yeah. And that is pretty much all the matchups that you'd regularly see. There's like a couple of missions. We might shout some out if people really want to know. We'll move into the last section here, which is the Q&A. So if you have your questions, be sure to start getting them out. We have a couple questions from both Twitter and the Discord that we're going to start with, but feel free to shout your questions out. We'll answer them to the best of our abilities. And we will start with this question from Twitter. I did not write down anyone's usernames, so apologies to the people that asked these questions, but if you ask these questions, hopefully you remember that you asked them.
Hold on, I did.
You wrote down the people?
Yeah, 1 second.
Wow. So responsible.
Sorry, I don't have the name for this first one.
Oh,
damn
well,
it.
sorry.
I have the name for the second one.
But they asked, what do your losses versus blue-black tempo usually look like, / what can blue-black tempo players do to beat you? This is something that we maybe touched on a little bit in like the blue-black tempo section, but generally these past like post MH2 Delvers wins has been mostly on the back of like Murktide Force, but blue-black tempo is much worse at that because they only play like 2 Murktides. But the deck is just, fortunately or unfortunately, like pretty one-dimensional. Like, if you really wanted a gun for D&T, maybe you could reach for those like uninteractive cards that don't rely on just a creature in play in the sideboard in some capacity to try to fight. I don't even know what those would look like. I mean, you could just play like actual factual Torpor Orb. Delver has done that in the past when D&T's been really popular, and it is good. But out of what is like stock, generally what I lose to are just the tempo starts, the very aggressive like creature daze force attack you down, kill you sort of starts with like Nether Goyfs, runaway Psychic Frog, runaway Murktide Regent, that sort of thing. But even like runaway Psychic Frog, again, much like Tamiyo, you can sometimes weather like 1, maybe even 2 hits, and the game doesn't spiral entirely out of control. You really need to lock down like getting your D&D opponent dead, because they just have so much card advantage. Tamiyo is a card that I think people use a little bit improperly, because people just accelerate to the ultimate and don't think about all the ways D&T has to stop that. I've won a lot of games where my opponent just like very aggressively tries to plus to 8, and I just end up getting us to a Skyclave or a Flickerwisp before that happens. Whereas like, if you don't have protection for your Tamiyo from a Skyclave or a Flickerwisp, maybe you should be minusing to pick up a Fatal Push or a Force of Will or even like a Brainstorm or something. Which I guess runs a little bit counter to what I was just talking about, where you don't really want to fight D&T on the card advantage axis, but like some card advantage is better than none if you're expecting your Tamiyo to not make it to the ult.
Yeah, like if you need that Tamiyo ult to win the game, then put the effort in to protect it, I think is your point.
Yeah. Like I've seen people Tamiyo at 6. They have Force Will in the graveyard. They plus to 8 and then lose to Skyclave rather than like maybe they should -3, pick up the Force of Will, and then continue to use the Force of Will to protect the Tamiyo and then go from there.
I think the only other thing I'll mention is that like a way to maybe win the matchup is prey on the fact that you're mostly going to play, or I shouldn't even say this, but there's a good chance you're going to play against splash builds. We have a lot of fetch lands. You could just make a lot of non-games by putting Stifle in your deck. It's not resilient, but I think this matchup is likely bad enough for you that you have to go for the high variance plays like that.
Yeah, the problem is like Stifle's so bad with Consign now, because like Consign does so much of what Stifle does that these decks don't have room for Stifles anymore.
Yeah, look, I'm not giving you a good answer. I'm just giving you an answer.
That's fair. You said this is a bad matchup concerningly often. I don't think that's true, Alex. I mean, we just led with a bunch of the good matchups. And the bad matchups are like these like 2% of the meta stuff. Like, I think that I would be happy if I played against a room full of Tempo and Reanimator, right? Which is like 40 whatever percent. Painter, good matchup. Some of the Nadu stuff are like even to pretty decent matchups. Eldrazi is definitely like Eldrazi plus like Forge is like the real nightmare. Maybe even like Doomsday plus Forge. Eldrazi is not that much of a nightmare. All right. Do we have any questions from chat? Thoughts on red white without a Johnny? Depends on what you're putting in replacement of it, I guess. I like a Johnny a lot just because it is a very good value 2-drop that plays synergistically with a lot of D&T's cards and also does the, like, without a Johnny, I probably wouldn't be nearly as excited to play Broadside Bombardiers in my deck, and without Bombardiers, like, you're looking at just splashing for Red plus Magus, which just exacerbates the problem of, like, very good when those cards are good, you're playing bad mono white when those cards aren't good, whereas, like, with the Ajani plus Bombardier combo, you do have that really powerful both board control element of having like these bunch of removal spells, as well as face control element that you get to kill your opponent really fast before they have a time to set up their back breaking combos and whatnot. You have the of this other Twitter user question.
Yes, this is from Nagi0, Japanese player, if I remember right. I know they've been working on D&T for a while, on and off active in the Discord, but I believe they asked this question on Twitter, if I remember right. The question is, it's a two-parter. The first is sort of asking for a justification for playing Flicker Wisp, is my interpretation.
Generally more than one Flicker Wisp, yeah.
Yeah. And the second part is asking about actually it's a question I'll leave to you. So I'll talk about the Flicker Wisp one. I think Flicker Wisp is just kind of reliable filler. It has synergies with just so many different cards in the deck that like I could imagine the standard just being to play one to recruit for those synergies. But I have been relatively happy with how often I'm drawing it when I have 2 to 3. I think it is by far the most cuttable card. We were talking earlier about whether if I could find room for something like Orcish Bowmasters in a blacklist again. If I was doing that, Flicker Wisp is probably the first card to go. So yeah, I think that's my answer. It's just the synergies for all that Flicker Wisp is a weird uncommon from 2008 or 2007, one of those 2 years. They sure keep printing cards that are just barely not Flicker Wisp.
Yeah.
And the fact that it always targets any permanent and it comes into play at the end of the turn, it just matters so much. And I don't know how much longer it's really going to stay in the deck, if I'm going to be completely honest with you, but I think that is sort of my reasoning for playing more than one.
Yeah. There's also the hope that Flickerwisp Formal War will make Flickerwisp better. Something that I've been clinging to is like Formal War plus Flickerwisp is a combo when you like assemble that thing, but it's not something that I've gotten to do a lot. So like, it is a card that generally like starts to get cut more and more. Like I have like 2 in this red-white list here, but like it's definitely on its way out the door. I would be shocked if it ended up at 0 anytime soon, just because of like the recruiter ability. I don't like a lot of like bullets for recruiter, but Flickerwisp is a pretty good one to have. It does lose a little bit of value, I assume, because Nagi is a Japanese player, that they probably talk to a lot of the Japanese players that are on mono white, and all these mono white lists have 1 Flickerwisp in them, and that makes a little bit more sense to me because they're all 4 Felia lists as well. Felia and Flickerwisp do fill fairly similar roles, so the card is like a little bit less exciting when you have 4 Felias in your deck.
Yep, that all makes sense. I will pass it off to you for the second part of this question, which is, how do you sideboard with Ajani and Broadside Bombardiers? When do you board out both? When do you keep 2 of each? Is there any time you cut one of them entirely, etc.?
Yeah. So, basically, I can't think of a lot of matchups where I like would fully cut Bombardiers, but I usually shave Bombardiers in matchups where I don't expect, like, I expect a lot of resistance on my opponent letting me keep creatures in play. Generally stuff like the tempo matchups where I'm not going to be able to feed it a lot of fodder. And Ajani I will cut more often in matchups where there isn't going to be a lot of ground blocking. Like I'll trim Ajani's like pretty aggressively versus Grixis Delver, stuff where gumming up the ground doesn't matter a lot. If I can't enable the Ajani plus Bombardiers combo a lot, because, you know, Grixis Delver has this combination of flyers and a bunch of interaction pieces, so it's hard to assemble that 1-2 punch. But Broadside, it just has a lot of applications that we've harped on truly so many times this stream already about turning the corner, something DT's not been able to do. So even against combo, stuff like Broadside will Solitude, just be like this like crazy amount of burst damage is always really nice. Ajani, I will generally cut like a little bit more aggressively in matchups that like you care less about the removal spell aspect or the like value aspect of the extra 2/1.
That all makes sense to me. I believe these questions on Discord that we have here are from the same person. I believe it's RC on Discord. That's the handle they have, at least in the D&T server. The first one is, given the expected wide open meta of Eternal Weekend, where in the early rounds you need to be ready to play against virtually anything, what would you two recommend? I want to let you answer this one first.
I would be hard pressed to recommend, like, we've spent the whole stream talking about how these are really the 2 viable decks, so I don't have anything but good things to say about like either one. But I've just been very excited to play red white. I find the synergies and access to the red cards very powerful. I like my thought process is very much of the like the D&T mindset of like sometimes you're just gonna lose the matchup lottery. You're gonna pair against Ruby Storm or whatever in your round 1. You're gonna eat shit, and like sometimes you just you lose that coin flip. But I really like how well this deck is built to attack the decks that I would expect to play against. I'm not going to build my deck in a way that like I have plans against, you know, queuing against the guy playing 2017 Ad Nauseam Tendrils or whatever. I'm going to build my deck to beat the people that are like showing up with like stock Eldrazi, stock blue-black, stock tempo, stock Nadu, stuff like that. So I would, as of right now at least, I'm very excited. I would like snap off this 95 if Eternal Wakered was tomorrow. Obviously things might change in the next month or so, but that's what I have to say.
Yep. I don't really have much to add to that. I would pick black-white, but I think it really just... I really think it can be personal preference. You just have to understand the strengths that you're playing to with either build of the deck.
And like
there's
my opinion might very well shift. Like if I'm like losing more to like scam and stuff, where I find that the black cards are probably better. It's like maybe instead of playing this deck, I will take, you know, try to take black white and twist it in ways that try to address the problem matchups like you are with like playing the Magus and stuff. there are ways to take the deck that you like more, you think is like the deck that you're more locked into playing, and trying to address those matchups rather than just like fully switching sides.
Yep. The second question they asked is one that we actually already talked about a lot, because it was just kind of asking about approaches the Eldrazi matchup, and I think generally speaking, the approach that you need to take the Eldrazi matchup is figure out how to get into a board state where they can't cast cards anymore.
Yep, that's the long and the short of it. You know, set up White Orchid Phantom Felia, set up Magus of the Moon, set up reducing their life total to 0. You just need to stop them from, like, you need to kill their early stuff, kill their Thought-Knot Seers and their Glaring Fleshlickers and stuff, and then also not die to, you know, them casting 3 Sowing Mega Spawns or whatever.
Yep.
Cut that out.
Do you want me to read off the next question?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So, we're seemingly spoiled these days for sideboard board wipes, but each has benefits, pros and cons to them. The following all seem close to reasonable, but I don't know which way to go. There's Wrath of the Skies, a card that we've talked about a bit. Hits some non-creatures, but it can be mana intensive. Split Up is one that I think was in one of the lists that you featured, but we haven't really talked about. It's relatively cheap at 3 mana. You know, 3 mana is usually like the maximum amount of mana that we're willing to pay for a card to do something like this. But it misses some creatures because it's destroy all tapped or untapped, right? That's how it works.
Yep.
Yeah. There's Toxic Deluge, which is always 3 mana, but paying life can be tricky. There's Battle of Bywater, which is a card that we've played quite a bit of before Modern Horizons 3 got printed. And then there's Cataclysm, which is very fun, but only sort of a board wipe. So I think it's kind of just asking for an evaluation of like which of these cards could we see ourselves playing and why. My opinion is that the first 3 mentioned, Wrath of the Skies, Split Up, Toxic Deluge, I would say those are probably the only ones I would consider. Split Up hasn't really been tested very much yet, so I don't want to endorse it yet, but you know, the idea of it seems pretty sound. It's the fact that the ability to destroy multiple creatures without the requirement being what the creatures are in any way, I think is pretty interesting. As for me right now, I'm just going to rely on Wrath of the Skies. I don't really feel the pressure to kill big things with my Wraths, or I should say expensive things with my Wraths, which is why I'm less interested in Toxic Deluge as well, especially because Toxic Deluge is kind of awkwardly positioned against Frog, because you have to basically pay as much life as the Frog could get up to, even though you're not actually asking your opponent, or you're not forcing your opponent to discard the cards to actually make it as big as it needs to survive the deluge. Unfortunately, Battle of Bywater is kind of a non-starter for me, specifically because it just does not answer Psychic Frog. And I don't think you can play any of these cards if it does not answer Psychic Frog. It's a big reason that we stopped playing it when Modern Horizons 3 came out. And Cataclysm's a fun card to cast, but I don't really see good matchups for that card, and I haven't for a long time.
Yeah, Split Up is a card that I definitely am planning on trying to cast more in the next month or so. It's a card I've casted a little bit in Dual Commander. I've casted a tiny bit in Legacy, but not something I have strong opinions on quite yet, but it has felt not as awkward as I initially expected. I think that it will kind of suffer versus a card like Wrath of the Skies and like stuff like the Nadu matchup, especially against stuff like Mana Dorks, where they can like tap in response if you're trying to destroy all untapped creatures. Really nightmarish in a matchup like Nadu Elves, where they can just like cast Court of Calling in response to it or something, or even just like tap a bunch of Mana Dorks. They have like untappers with like Quarian Ranger and stuff like that. But generally speaking, Split Up is nice. It might be a way to like help address the Eldrazi matchup a little bit. It's still something that I like haven't tested enough. to feel confident endorsing, but it's obviously way better than Wrath of the Skies versus people putting big creatures into play, stuff like Tempo or Eldrazi or Reanimator, stuff like that. Definitely a card that is on my radar. You already mentioned it with Battle of Bywater, but yeah, that card is out of my deck forever until Psychic Frog gets banned, and probably until something in Eldrazi gets addressed, because Battle of Bywater missing like Scions and Fleshraker is like pretty rough for that card. It was much better when it was just a Wrath of God versus Delver, because they just had like DRC, Delver, Murktide, everything got blown up, and now that they have like cameos and frogs and stuff like that, it just misses way too much of the format right now.
Yeah. It was also a Wrath of God against Reanimator at the same time, too.
Yeah. All right, we'll take a question from chat here. We did not, from Bear with Two Guns there. Have we talked about the new control matchup yet? Specifically, Jeskai with 3 or 4 Wrath of the Skies. Not something that we had really mentioned, huh? Not something that it's really on my radar lately. Like, I know it's a deck that exists. Let's see if we can find, like, a good stock-looking build, huh?
I'm not sure if there's going to be one.
Yeah,
mostly because
that
it's not.
That is the thing, is that, like, just the control players will never have a stock build. It's so difficult to really...
I mean, we have to flip a coin to see whether there's a Days Undoing in the list to begin with.
Yes.
I think generally these matchups are a bit tough to approach. I think ever since 4th got printed, that's the only card that matters. I think Wrath of the Skies does notably make it a little bit tougher to contend with 4th, because you can't really extend your board in any way. I don't know. It's tough because, like, 4th, it has the same problem that every control deck does against D&T, where most of the time their ways to win the game are like very minimal. They take almost no room in their deck. But sometimes they do cast their one copy, and then one copy of 4th, and it feels like there's nothing you ever could have done. I do think our own Wrath of the Skies helps this a bit, because it's the one way you can play a card that's not embarrassing, that also clears out all of your opponent's knights that they make off of the 4th Erlingus. You just have to be careful of the Mystic Sanctuary that they can likely play to sort of cast it a second time. But yeah, that's mostly all I have to say about it.
Yeah, I'm struggling to find a stock list, because I know the initial builds when this getting popular were on like 4 Wrath of the Skies, way more tuned the narratives, but it seems like a lot of the lists lately have been like cutting away at that sort of stuff. Which does kind of make sense, even with like 4 tuned the narratives in your deck. The Wrath of the Skies can be a clunkier removal spell in the face of stuff like Eldrazi. But I think this deck in general, much like D&T, is suffering from the oppressive rule of Eldrazi, in that, like, you're a deck that's trying to hit 3 land drops, you're gonna have a bad time against Sowing Micah Spawn.
Yes.
Hence the, like, shit pile of Consigns and Harbinger of the Seas and Ruination in this sideboard. But yeah, generally D&T has had a very good control matchup historically. You suffer when your opponent has unanswerable late game cards that kill you on turn 20 or whatever. It was really good in the glory days when your opponent was just on like Uros, had nothing. You were just gonna kill them with your Sword Splash Drives and Skyclaves, and they could never actually win a game. When 4th got printed, your matchups got a lot worse, because suddenly on turn 25 or whatever, they were just going to fireball you to death. So there is a little bit of the onus on D&T to actually close out the game, but generally, like, you had the card advantage to contend with those early turns, and then eventually just like start slowly shifting and trying to turn the corner. Wrath of the Skies, like you mentioned, is like we have a bunch of removal that is very not good against these shapes of decks, where if they're not on Uro with these Jeskai builds, so we can just like gut a bunch of Plows and Solitudes out of our deck, and you get to play a card like Wrath of the Skies just to answer 4th Erlingus. If it's not literally lethal, you can just untap and Wrath the board, take the Monarchy, which can and has worked out for me fairly well in post board games. But yeah, it is Wrath of the Skies being their Wrath effect is pretty unfortunate. The fact that it cleans up Vial, generally one of your best cards in the matchup against like Terminuses and Supreme Verdicts was just Aether Vial. It was really hard for them to answer. You can sit there and just like rebuild your board on a dime. Now it's much harder when they can just wrath away all your creatures and your Aether Vial. But I think this matchup is largely like, you know, it's a control matchup. I think you're pretty okay.
Yeah, if you're really struggling, you could splash Teague if you want to. Basically, annihilates like half their deck, but there's not really many good Teague matchups. So
Yeah, that was one of the big
I
reasons
would.
for Teague in the heyday was, you know, Beans with, you know, fourth and, you know, pending and whatever.
Yeah, their deck just like kind of stops working if you have a Teague protected by Caracas and or Mom.
Yeah, they have just like plows. That's it. All right. I think we have one more question from the Discord. If no one has anything else, did I miss any questions? Feel free to copy paste your question if I missed them, because
Yeah, especially if you asked it earlier in the stream. If hopefully you're still here, but
yes. But for now, we'll cover this last question, which is very simple. What advice would you give to new D&D players? Play a different deck. No. Much more honestly, if you are getting into D&T specifically, presuming you are getting into Legacy as a whole, play a lot of Legacy. Like, you are going to lose a lot of games. You're going to lose a lot of games regardless of what Legacy deck you choose, but D&T especially, you really want to understand how Legacy works. D&T is a great deck for building your deck to like fight certain matchups. It's the reason I like reaching for color splashes so often, is because you can like take these cards to address certain matchups. You really need to know like what your opponent is doing and how you can interact with that. You just need. There's no better way than just to play a bunch of games. Obviously, there's like a ton of videos. Both me and Akaleth have near infinite supply of D&T matches recorded that are on YouTube at this point. So yes, if you're mindlessly jamming games and you're losing a lot because you don't know what you're doing, you can always watch much better players perform with the deck. That's how I learned back in the day, watching Thomas Envoldson play D&T back in like 2013. Makes me feel really old saying that in 2024 after playing D&T for 11 years.
I'm I'm gonna play this deck till I die, man. I don't know. Yeah, I'll add on. I'm gonna plug one of my articles here real quick. Don't let the name of Death and Taxes fool you. We're not a mana denial deck. There was a time in history where we were, but I think even that is a little bit complicated. Right now, this is, I think, most important to say for anybody who is getting into the deck and starting with mono white, because they're just trying to get into the format. They don't care about playing like the best version or don't have access to cards, whatever it might be. You are not a mana denial deck. You are a control deck. And one of the axes upon which you can interact with your opponent is mana denial when it is favorable for you to do so.
It's mono white Jund.
It is mono white Jund. If you are using Wasteland against your opponent who is playing Delver of Secrets, you are doing it wrong.
Yeah,
just make your land drops because your mana matters more than theirs, and the only way to the easiest way to throw away winnable games is to just get rid of the mana that you need to cast your spells.
Yeah, a good piece of hyperbole that we like to throw around in the D&T Discord is that your win rate will go up if you cut 4 Wastelands from your deck and add 4 basic planes. Just Wasteland is not a card that we play because you're gonna get them, you're gonna Wasteland them, they're not gonna hit their land drops, and you're just gonna win that way. You're gonna tax them out. Wasteland is a card that we play to interact with very powerful land-based cards, Urza Sagas, Gaia's Cradles, Cloud Posts, what have you, Underground Seas that are casting Doomsday, stuff like that. It is not often. Sometimes, very occasionally, you smell the blood in the water. Your opponent goes turn 1, mull to 5, ponder, shuffle, you're like, all right, maybe it's time for this wasteland, but like that should not be the primary focus of the card.
It should not. And thank you, Inert Materials, for linking my article that I was plugging. If what we just said doesn't make any sense to you, hit me up. I got a link for you.
Yes, shout out to Akaleth's Patreon. And I think, what's the prognosis for Thalia? I'm sorry to say, might be terminal.
It's not looking great for her. I'm sorry.
The mono white players have even cut her. The mono white players also cut Spirit of the Labyrinth, but no, I'm not really, but like we can pretend for a moment that when they ban Psychic Frog, we can think about Thalia again, because the reason we were playing Thalia instead of Spirit of the Labyrinth in black white for a while. We're gonna ignore the fact that I think that may have been incorrect the whole time, but I specifically switched from Thalia to Psychic to Spirit of the Labyrinth because of Psychic Frog. You just wanted more cards that interacted with that. More cards that were like a stopgap for that card going out of control. Thalia does nothing. Spirit of the Labyrinth turns it fully off until you kill it. Stuff like that. So maybe they ban Psychic Frog. We bring Thalia back into the deck. You never know. I mean, you kind of know, but...
This is what we get because they made a return to Innistrad block and then didn't print a new Thalia.
Yeah, the world really just needs is a power crept Thalia, or just any fucking power crept hate bear. Jesus, our hate bears are from 2014. It's a new decade. Give us power crept Thalia. Give us power crept Spirit of the Labyrinth, please. Thalia's like 2012, right?
2012. Yeah. Actually, let me double check.
2011.
It's either
maybe? Dark Ascension. I don't know.
No, it's definitely yeah. Let me double check. 2012, February 3rd, 2012.
There we go. Yeah, 2012. Spirit of the Labyrinth. 2014. Why the fuck are we playing this card? Can we get a better one, please? Why does Black get all the good hate bears?
Thalia's fucking going to high school soon. Come on.
That's so terrifying to think about.
Yeah, it is.
All right. I think that might be the end. Would be good. Everyone get excited. Less than 15 hours until pre-war formal work comes out. I will be streaming tomorrow. I have no idea when. Whenever I escape my work, I'm going to come home. I'm going to buy 3 pre-war formal wears. And I'm going to be streaming Death and Taxes. I'm sure, Akaleth, you'll be streaming your regular time on Thursday.
I sure will. And it's funny, I think my Sunday stream, I racked up the most formal wear moments in a single stream than I have since I started keeping track. So really good timing to finally get this dumbass card on Magic Online.
I mean, it does make sense. Overlord definitely exacerbates the number of formal wear moments that can't exist in a game. It just mills you so much.
I don't even think Overlord was the deal. I think I just cast enough Stoneforges where I was like, I just wanted it to be a formal wear like every time. I'm pretty sure I cast 3 Stoneforge Mystics, and every single one of them, like in a single game, and every single one of them, I was like, well, I would get formal wear here if I could. It'd be great.
God, I'm so excited. There have been a couple of moments recently that I've been thinking about, like, do we want Stoneforge Mystic in our deck? And I keep, like, online specifically, and I keep thinking about Formal War's coming. But, like, Formal War's so good. We have to keep Stoneforge in this deck, man. Formal War, like, if Formal War didn't get printed, there might be a world where I'd, like, stopped playing Stoneforge in this deck.
I wouldn't, but I see where you're coming from.
Yeah, like, there are, like, it has a lot of good upsides still, especially that now that we have removal spells in both splash colors. Like the Lion Sash, like the Lion Sash plus removal spell plus Cauldra trifecta is very powerful, but Formora really fills a gap.
Yeah. Yeah, when I think about the fact that like I think on my stream I logged 58 formal wear moments since I started keeping track. Obviously, who knows how many of those, like, not some of those were from the same game. It's hard to know how many of those moments formal wear was so pivotal that like I couldn't, that like if I had formal wear I would have won a game that I then lost, but like it matters so much, and I'm so happy to feel like I only get to play this card that's awesome. It's a really fun and powerful card, and I don't have to drive an hour to my F&M to play it.
Yes. I remember after I got top four in Jarvis's like charity 7K back in like July, I came back, first stream, first match, lost a game because I didn't have four more in my deck.
Was it the one where your opponent made like a sorcerer, like a main phase merit lage, and you had surveilled a wisp into your yard?
Yes, that was the exact one.
Yeah, I remember that one.
And I just I got up and walked away from the computer. Just, oh man, it's gonna be so nice that we have almost united paper and online legacy, missing a couple of nonsense Doctor Who cards that are maybe playable. Shout out to Sibylline soothsayers and dinosaurs on a spaceship or whatever the fuck PVDH is doing with those things lately. But
Yeah, we just got a question in chat, Mika1492, starting with two formal wear main deck. I know that that's what Extra Cloud's going to be playing tomorrow, is this list basically.
Yeah.
I think uh, two is probably a good number for most lists. The only list where I'm not really in favor of the second copy is my black white lists, because you run into a lot of issues in my experience where you don't have enough creatures in your graveyard to fuel both your Emperor of Bones and a formal wear.
Yeah. And it's a distinct possibility that maybe we're wrong. Maybe two form war is still really good there. Maybe one form war is actually where it's at in all these lists. But that's the beauty of finally getting this on Magic Online. We could finally get in an appropriate amount of reps with them. But I think most
Yes.
lists will start at two. The mono white list, especially with like the reliance on Felia, Felia form war synergy is very good. Um, would you play?
Would I play a fourth? In my current list, formal wear is the fifth equipment. So yes and yes,
Oh yeah, because you have the GT still.
because I still have GTA. Yeah. In the Reanimator era, the Grief era, I did not have GTA in my list, so I only had four. But I'm bringing the GTA back right now, specifically mostly because of Nadu.
Yeah. All right, I think it's a good time to wrap things up. It's like midnight for you. It's 11 o'clock for me. Whatever.
Yeah, I very much have to get to bed, but it was a good stream.
Yes. Got a lot done. Hopefully, everyone that watched this got a little bit of information about registering your favorite terrible white cards at Eternal Weekend. If you have any further questions about the deck going forward, both me and Akaleth will be streaming a bunch. I stream on Tuesdays here this time. Akaleth streams on Thursdays and Sundays. We'll be playing a ton of Death and Taxes in preparation for Eternal Weekend. So if you have any questions you want answered, you can feel free to chime in at any of those. You can also pick our brains over in the D&T Discord. Akaleth, anything you wanna plug?
I don't think so. If you check out my stream, you've probably heard this before, but I do have a Patreon that has a monthly updated sideboard guide for my favorite or for my preferred D&T list. If you subscribe to my Patreon at the $5 and up tier, you get access to that on our lovely sideboard guide website, StifleNought, made by our friend George. Otherwise, yeah, just catch me streaming.
Yeah, everyone.
If any of you are going to Eternal Weekends, you can certainly say hello to me. I'll be there. And
Yes.
happy to talk, happy to chat with people.
Yes. Everyone go follow Akaleth on social medias, as well as me. If you're here not following me, follow me here on Twitch. Follow Akaleth on Twitch. Follow us both on Twitter, on YouTube. This stream will go up on YouTube. I'm literally going to upload it as soon as I hit sign off. It will be up on YouTube. I'll share that and all the proper. I'll tweet about it. I'll put it on in the D&T Discord, stuff like that. So hopefully people can look back on it to help out people that couldn't be here for it live. If you want to support me, I have Cyborg Guys as well. If you subscribe on Twitch, you get access to Cyborg Guys on FlexSlot. So between me and Akaleth, we have most of your D&T woes covered. I guess we probably don't have Mono White covered, but maybe there's some third D&T player out there who can take over that mantle.
There's a chance I'll throw the dogs a bone with
begrudgingly make a Mono White sign. I was thinking about it. Yeah,
maybe
Formalware inspires us. Who knows?
Yeah, we'll see. It feels a little disingenuous to give a list that I don't believe in, though.
Yes.
So I'm probably not gonna end up doing that.
I agree. We did literally say I cannot, in good conscience, endorse playing this list earlier on the stream. So perhaps not. But let's go ahead and sign off here.
Thank you for watching, everybody. It was a great time.
Yes.
Thank you for having me on.
Hell yeah. I'm looking forward to State of the Noodle 2025 edition sometime down the road. We will see you all later, chat.